Welcome to the first of the 2 days of the GFDRR Partnership Days event. My name is Cristina Otano. I'm a Senior Operations Officer at GFDRR, the Brussels office, and I'll be your moderator for the day. In the last few years, you've witnessed and you hear about, all the work we've done to reduce disaster risk and to promote disaster risk management throughout our work. Today, we are going to speak more concretely about what we are doing and showcase some of our concrete achievements in the different thematic areas. Before we proceed, I have a few housekeeping matters. For those that are here, just know that we will have a Q&A section, and you can also look at the agenda at the QER if you have any questions about what we are doing there. If there are many questions, we are very time bound today, so we won't be able to address everything. If that's the case, we'll follow up with everyone online. For those that are watching this online, you will also have a chance to participate in the Q&A. You just have to raise your hand in the chat, and we have a colleague that will be looking at that. The only thing is noted that by default, the mic for those outside of this room is muted, but you can still participate. And, as those staying here, you can look and scan for the QR of the event page. You have it on the screens. You also have it in the permanent slide you're seeing in your computers. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Cécile Tokar from USAID. She's sitting in for Sarah Charles, who had to leave in a hurry. It seems that these days we are having all sorts of different things that are changing our agendas. So anyway, without further ado, welcome, Cécile. Looking forward to hear from you.
Thank you so much. Sarah apologized. I think the disadvantage of being in the same time and 2 blocks away from your office, you can get cold easily. So she had to go back to the office for an urgent call. Well, good afternoon and welcome back. Thank you, GFDRR, for a great lunch. So this session will be very much learning. So I guarantee you're not going to be bored or fall asleep. So we have great presentations coming up. As we discussed, the challenges we face are complex and intertwined. Climate change, conflict, COVID-19, lack of governance, instability converge to magnify the impacts of disasters and leaving communities even more vulnerable and exposed. It is also crucial to recognize, and we all in this room definitely, and on the virtual world, recognize the fundamental link between disaster and climate change. And we discussed this morning. And we also discussed this morning, we can only address compounding challenges through embracing a whole community approach that involves concerted efforts of governments, communities, civil society, academia, and private sector. Collaboration and cooperation among these stakeholders are not just desirable, but necessary to operationalize and sustain disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. As many indicated today, and as well as many countries stated last week in Sendai high-level meeting for midterm review, we must recognize that disaster risk management efforts that lack meaningful inclusivity, particularly with our local participation, are ineffective and could jeopardize hard-earned both disaster risk reduction and development gains. It is imperative that we engage all segments of society, especially those who are most vulnerable, marginalized, and underrepresented. By including diverse perspectives, we can ensure that our efforts are effective and that ensure that no one is left behind. As they say, nothing about us without us moving forward with the marginalized group. GFDRR is at the forefront of this innovation and inclusion. It was great to hear that efforts of gender integration reached in over 90%. When I first joined GFDRR, when we first joined, it was about 5 to 10%. And that wasn't a long time ago, about a decade. So it's great that we are going that direction, but we still have to do a lot. So although it's work in the diverse thematic areas and cross-cutting priorities, as well as wide-ranging of partnership. I think that's the beauty of GFDRR, bringing various stakeholders together, creates opportunities to collaborate on innovative solutions, engages an exchange of the best practices among donors, stakeholders, and others, and facilitates the implementation of effective policies and programs. The technical expertise of GFDRR, you've seen a very brief preview this morning, is very rich, combined with extensive development experience of GFDRR and technical experts, and also dedicated donors and partners, including you today joining both in person and virtually. We can combine our collective knowledge, resources, expertise, experiences to make substantial contribution to reduce disaster risk and building resilience worldwide. The partnership days underscore the importance of strengthening alliances and collaboration. Over the next 2 days, you will have the opportunity to witness firsthand how GFDRR works with its partners to address disaster risk and climate change adaptation. Together, we will strive to create a more resilient and secure future for all. Thank you again for joining.
Thank you so much, Cecile, for your good words. As I said earlier, we are doing a lot of improvisation today because things happened. And so we were to have Axel von Strottenberg, our senior managing director, attending, but he also got caught on something else. And so actually we have him on video. That's the good thing of preparing. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm here. Unfortunately, I couldn't be here in person. I was running yesterday, and then I got hurt. So, so now I'm stuck at home. That can happen. But I'm very happy to join you here via video conference and welcome you all to the GFDR Partnerships Days. These meetings give us a really good opportunity to connect again and share ideas about how we can build on our existing track record and scale up the important work in helping developing countries prepare for disaster and strengthen resilience. The GFDRR and the World Bank have had been at the forefront of resilience and preparedness efforts. With this support, a growing number of countries, such as the Philippines and Bangladesh, now prioritize disaster risk reduction and address risk before a disaster strike. And in Bangladesh alone, prioritizing disaster risk reduction has saved the lives of millions of vulnerable people. I myself visited Bangladesh earlier this year, and I could see firsthand how investment in resilient infrastructure is indeed saving lives in areas prone to cyclones, for example. And let me add here, it was very good to see the recent evaluation by the World Bank's independent evaluation group confirming that GFDRR has contributed significantly to increasing the bank's investment in disaster risk reduction. Now, quite frankly, having worked myself in the regions as VP, but also as an MD, I can say that it just reconfirms what I have been seeing. This group is doing absolutely spectacular work. And but with increasing threats posed by climate change, demand for this work is growing. And we need to evolve and become even more effective in responding to client needs. You're probably all familiar with the evolution roadmap at the bank, and we are trying to do more and also to do better and to address really important challenges facing low and middle income countries, from climate change to the higher frequency of cyclones or hurricanes. And in that sense, providing more effective support and earlier support, and with this help communities that are under threat. So support is about much more than only financial resources. And mind you, financial resources matter. but it is also about knowledge. It is about technical expertise too. And the bank and GFDRR are committed to delivering the full package to our clients. And GFDRR promises to play a crucial role in this evolution of the World Bank. Through its partnership, GFDRR can mobilize the expertise and resources of other institutions, and through its technical leadership, can build capacity at the country level and support innovation and knowledge. GFDRR is also one of the key partners of implementing the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015-2030. The midterm review of the Sendai Framework was held in New York City just a few days ago and gave us an opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to this global agenda. And as we evolve, we are also focusing on how we can use technology to enable our work. We must take advantage of emerging technologies to improve data collection, analysis, and disseminations. And GFDRR's remote damage assessment tool is a great example of technology that is making more efficient use of emergency resources. So in closing, I really am excited that we have this partnership days. There is a huge potential to do more. I hope that you will discuss all these aspects. It is not only finance, it is the partnerships that matter and how we can effectively help the communities. So I wish you all fruitful discussions, but also a clear sense on how we take this very important agenda forward. And I'm sure with your track record, we will do very, very well. So have great discussions and thank you.
Thanks to you, Axel, and we hope that you recover soon. Maybe just to reiterate again that indeed partnerships are not only about financial contributions, are also about the expertise and about having the right knowledge. I think our nature-based solutions work is a testament to that. So I would like to invite Stefan Halgate, our Senior Climate Change Advisor, to actually introduce the new section.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Axel, for this openings. So we were talking about knowledge, and we were talking about partnership. So I think this is a great introduction to this work on nature-based solutions. So I'm Stefan Halgate. I'm a climate change senior advisor at the World Bank. I've been in GFDRR a few years ago, and so it's really a pleasure to see some of the faces I was interacting with a few years ago. Glad to be here. I'm introducing here a new report that GFDRR has supported and realized on nature-based solutions for climate resilience. And it's, of course, a very important topic. Nature-based solutions is a key topic in many of the conversations we have here, but also Axel mentioned the evolution roadmap, where nature-based solutions is also something that is clearly prioritized by many of our stakeholders, donors, and client countries alike. And this is sort of a no-brainer, right? I mean, who doesn't like nature-based solutions? More efficient, more resilient, nicer to look at, maybe. Also able to capture a lot of co-benefits. So it's not only about resilience, but it's also about biodiversity, about access to nature, about quality of life. And still, even though everybody likes nature-based solutions, it's surprisingly difficult to scale them up. And when we look at the projects, it's still something that is at the frontier, not something that is considered just the normal way of doing things, including in climate resilience. Even though that might be one of the sectors where the use of nature-based solutions is the most discussed and the most useful. And everybody's talking about using mangroves, about the role of forests for water management. Still, this seems to be difficult. And one of the issue that when you talk to people and asking them, like, what is the problem? What is the barrier? One of the challenge is always data, economic analysis, making the case that this is a good investment and not just something nice. And so we really felt the need to contribute to the discussion about the methodologies, the economics of nature-based solutions, so that we can make that case not only to people who know the topic, but also to another type of experts in Ministry of Finance, in the financial industry, to explain that this is not something that is just popular. This is something that is good economics and make a lot of sense. And so the report we'll be launching today is really a contribution to that work, trying to provide guidance about how to do a good economic analysis on nature-based solutions so that we can convince beyond the range of people who have been working on the topic. So in terms of agenda, we'll start with a presentation about nature-based solutions. We have with us Marta Vicarelli. She's professor at University of Massachusetts. And I was asking Niels how to pronounce this, and I have no idea how to do so, but Amherst. Oh, like French people, excellent. So Amherst. Good, excellent choice. So she's assistant professor of economics, and she has been working on those topics for a long time. And she will just open this session with a broad discussion about the topic. It will be followed by Boris Van Zaten, and so I think we'll just go one by one. But so Boris is one of the disaster risk management specialists at GFDRR. And is one of the key authors of the reports, and he will present the main finding of this report. And this will be followed by a panel discussion, but I'll introduce the panelists when we get there. So Marta, please, the floor is yours.
Is it okay if I don't use the mic, or should I use the mic?
I think you have to use the mic because we have people connected.
Yeah. Yes, okay. So this is actually for, yes. Oh, this is to go forward? Okay, sorry. All right, so first of all, thank you for introducing myself, me, and I wanted to say something about myself, which is that I want to give you a little glimpse to the results of a study that we have recently developed on cost effectiveness of nature-based solutions. We know that ecosystem and ecosystem services help achieve many benefits. Reduction in disaster risk, sustainable development. Stefan mentioned biodiversity enhancement, climate change mitigation, et cetera, and we also know that they have been recognized, nature-based solutions have been recognized in major international framework agreements. The issue, however, is that we still have limited scientific knowledge about the economic performance, both in terms of cost effectiveness and in terms of equity and distributional considerations. When I say limited scientific knowledge, is really like the peer review knowledge. What do we know? So I wanted to emphasize this aspect of benefits before I jump into my study, and emphasize the large variety of benefits that go beyond the initial goals and include what in ecology we describe as provisioning services, regulating services of ecosystems, and also cultural services. So now, going into the study, our research question was to assess existing scientific knowledge about cost effectiveness of ecosystem services with a focus on of nature-based solutions, with the focus on ecosystem for disaster risk reduction, nature-based solutions for climate change adaptation and mitigation. Oh, sorry. In order to answer this research question, we developed a database of peer-reviewed scientific literature, and there were 3 criteria for studies to be included into this database. The first criteria was that the study had to perform an economic assessment of the net benefits of nature-based solutions, and that the intervention considered, so the economic assessment had to examine the protective services, so the disaster risk reduction component, And the third condition for studies to be included in the database was that the outcomes compared intervention with no intervention or with a different type of intervention. The protocol was very laborious. We started with 20,000 studies, and after multiple rounds of screening and in-depth review, we compiled a database of 87 studies. So very, very conservative. Something that I should mention is that, again, we looked on the peer review literature, English-speaking journals published between 2000 and 2021. And one of the first results that you see here is that there has been growth in the publications, scientific publications, and you can see upticks in correspondence immediately after major policy milestones that were of importance in relation to nature-based solutions. So, for example, after the IPCC special report on extremes, the Sendai framework, SFDRR, Sendai framework on disaster risk reduction, and then COP21, the Paris Agreement. We examined every study in relation to the ecosystems analyzed and the hazard analyzed. And here, columns correspond to the ecosystem analyzed, and the rows correspond to the hazards. And what you can see is that the most frequently studied ecosystems are coastal, wetland, and forest ecosystems, and the most frequently studied hazards are floods, storms, and erosion. So this is like a heat map to understand where is the research focusing on. This slide contains two different pieces of information. In the graph, on the left-hand side, you see property rights structure of the nature-based solutions analyzed, and on the right-hand side, you see sources of finance. Now, chromatically, the dark blue correspond to public, light blue to private, and yellow mixed. So if we focus on property rights, and each row corresponds to a type of ecosystem, in terms of property rights, you see that the property rights structure dominating is mixed, which means that private and public entities are sharing the management of the nature-based solutions. On the right-hand side, you see sources of finance. And what you see there is that public financing dominates the financing structure. This is the geographic distribution of the studies. For each study, we geolocalized the observations, so the locations of each study. One study could correspond to multiple locations. So in the map, you see many dots, and these dots correspond to the observations associated to the 87 studies. And we have 402 observations. There are two colors for the observations. You see yellow dots and blue dots. The yellow dots correspond to observations associated with studies that found that nature-based solutions are cost-effective. And the blue dots are associated with studies that found that nature-based solutions are cost-effective sometimes under certain circumstances. We didn't find any article saying that nature-based solutions are not cost-effective. A little bit more about cost-effectiveness. Overall, 71% of studies said that nature-based solutions are cost-effective, and 24% of studies said that nature-based solutions are cost-effective under certain circumstances. And you see the breakdown by type of ecosystem in this slide. We also looked a little bit more in depth and trying to see whether our studies were comparing engineering solutions with nature-based solutions. And we found that 39% of studies were performing this comparison. And within these 39% of studies, 65% found that nature-based solutions are more cost-effective than engineering solutions. And 26% found that nature-based solutions are more cost-effective under certain circumstances. Again, no study found that they were less cost-effective. Something that we found interesting actually was that only 48% of studies reported that nature-based solution analysis contributed to biodiversity benefits. Obviously, this is not because it's not true, it's just that the analyses were not necessarily performed. And particularly, very few studies, among these 48%, very few studies attempted to measure the benefits or to even evaluate them monetarily. Like the evaluation was really very, very few. As you know, when we think about cost effectiveness or cost efficiency, that doesn't necessarily incorporate equity and distributional considerations. And so we also looked at the studies trying to understand the nexus between nature-based solutions, income inequalities, gender, race and ethnicity, participation of indigenous groups and local communities in the planning and in the fruition of these solutions, and then the contribution to sustainable development goals. And what we found was that only 30% of studies investigated these relationships. This is, I'm not going to go into the details of this slide. It's just to tell you that we cataloged all the methodologies adopted to estimate the net benefits of nature-based solutions. So net benefits meaning the total benefits minus the total cost. And what I wanted to highlight in this slide is simply that only 22% of studies performed the cost-benefit analysis, and actually even a smaller fraction of the total number of studies adopted best practices in the performance of the cost-benefit. So, few conclusions before sharing some recommendations. I think that based on our results, we can say that nature-based solutions are cost-effective in mitigating hazards. We were particularly surprised. There could be always publication bias, but it's very strong, the signal that none of the studies examined found them non-effective, non-cost-effective in mitigating hazards. The other finding that was surprising to us and very interesting in my opinion is that despite finding that they are cost-effective, these nature-based solutions, we still see that benefits are understudied and underestimated. So they are cost-effective, and yet benefits are still understudied and underestimated. Another aspect that I thought was interesting is this financing structure and the fact that public sector is essentially supporting the financing of nature-based solutions. And when we think about upscaling, probably we should think also about innovative ways to finance nature-based solutions that involve also the private sector. Based on their cost effectiveness, I think that it's clear that nature-based solutions emerge as very useful tools to mitigate the biodiversity climate crisis. And an additional element that I wanted to bring to the discussion and that emerged in so many of the articles that we analyzed is that ecosystem conservation is more effective, more efficient than restoration because it's achieved at a lower cost. A few recommendations. The evidence of paucity of data about the benefits of nature-based solutions. So we still have to investigate more aspects. When I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation the large variety of benefits of nature-based solutions, we are investigating only some of the benefits, not all of them. We still have to do more work in understanding all the benefits that they provide, or at least recognizing them. And it seems that this paucity of evidence is also one of the factors limiting the upscaling of nature-based solutions. In order to talk about all these benefits and incorporate them in the analysis, there are several efforts that should be undertaken, expanding data collection efforts, engaging with local stakeholders to understand really the repercussions at a local scale, adopting comprehensive evaluation methods. And so it emerges the need for evaluation framework that is comprehensive and reliable and rigorous. And so in this, and rigorous, and not only to measure and compare, but also to communicate these benefits to stakeholders involved in the development of nature-based solutions and in the fruition. And so in this slide, I think, bridging to Boris' talk, in this slide, I think that this publication that Boris is about to present is extremely timely and needed, providing guidelines to assess the benefits and costs of nature-based solutions for climate resilience. Before leaving the floor, I just wanted to acknowledge all the people that supported this study. from many organizations, and I'm sure that some of you are familiar with PEDRA, the Euro-Mediterranean Center for Climatic Change. And then also would like to recognize my colleagues at the University of Massachusetts Amherst College, and then University of Cologne. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marta. So that's give a good picture of what is done now, and now we have Boris about what should be done. And I understand we'll start with a video.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Marta. Indeed, I'm very happy to stand here to be able to launch this report and present it to you. Before I go give you a quick overview, a quick feel of the contents and where the resources can be accessed, we'll start with a quick video.
Around the world, communities have begun harnessing the power of nature as a cost-effective and sustainable way to adapt to climate change and support their livelihoods. Nature-based solutions are actions to protect, manage, or restore natural ecosystems, like restoring mangroves for storm surge protection, or developing a park designed to reduce city flooding. But despite the huge potential, financing for nature-based solutions is only gradually increasing. Now, the World Bank and the Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery, GFDRR, are scaling up support to enable further integration of nature-based solutions and inspiring governments, communities, and investors to work with nature to better solve our climate challenges. Unlike gray infrastructure, nature-based solutions provide multiple benefits at the same time. But one of the barriers to unlocking more financing is that valuing and communicating these benefits is sometimes challenging. Let's look at an example. First is the action. A country decides to invest in coastal wetland restoration, aiming at reducing flood risk. This leads to impacts on the biophysical processes, which means storm surges and wave energy are reduced by the restored vegetation. This improves the provision of ecosystem services, a significant reduction in flood levels, and an increase in the fish stock. Increasing the benefits to the people, less damage to assets and less business interruptions, but also an increase in fishing revenue and new opportunities for recreation. Identifying and assessing the wide range of benefits and beneficiaries is a powerful way to help communities, policymakers, and the private sector make informed decisions to invest more in nature-based solutions. Let's work together with nature to make our communities more resilient to climate change. These guidelines are now available for download at naturebasedsolutions.org.
Yeah, so no, very happy to be able to share this report and launch this report with you on behalf of GFDR and our technical line of work on nature-based solutions. This has been an endeavor that has involved the different sectors, different sectoral experts at the World Bank, and also I'm presenting this on a long list of co-authors who've been working on this with our team over the past year. I should also say that it builds very much upon work that we've been doing with our partners at Stanford University, at the University of California, Santa Cruz, at the VU University in Amsterdam, that have all contributed to this work. So first, I'm going to say very quickly something about our technical line of work on nature-based solutions for climate resilience. That has led the development of this report, and then I'll kind of dive into the report itself. So just really quickly, I think I also touched upon this in the morning, but this is a global line of work that is a collaboration between GFDRR and also the water and environment sectors at the World Bank, and the objective of our team is really to help World Bank task teams and clients with the integration of nature-based solutions for climate resilience at the project level. And I think Marta's presentation probably gave a good feeling of what these type of nature-based solutions are. So it's often working in the city with green infrastructure to reduce flooding or to reduce extreme heat. In some cases, it's about kind of coastal ecosystem restoration or protection, such as mangroves or coral reefs. But it could also be like catchment level interventions, for example. Yeah, the way we work is really we have a team of experts who is kind of directly supporting our task teams in the country to help them with the identification, with the necessary technical support, with the capacity building to help them kind of integrate these solutions into their project. And on this slide, it's just some of the preliminary results to date. I'm saying preliminary because we're at the end of a reporting period, so some of these estimations might still be a bit on the conservative side. But on the map, you can see some of the countries where we have ongoing engagements. We've supported over the past 2 years over 40 projects or projects that are in preparation. We've informed activities reaching over 11 million beneficiaries. But also we are kind of, we aim to be a knowledge leader. So we have a large library of knowledge that is accessible to World Bank teams and people from outside the World Bank. And we keep databases of experts. So like if a project team from a certain country comes to us, we suggest expert teams to them. And then we also, of course, have we develop targeted knowledge products. So one of them is the piece that we present today, and those are some of them are very successful as well, with over 40,000 downloads of the key products combined. So I think one of the catalog of nature-based solutions for urban resilience should also be around. So feel free to have a look. Yeah. So diving back into this report. So why this report, right? And this is in our work with teams, we are getting a lot of requests, as Stefan also mentioned, we're getting a lot of requests on the, okay, but how do you do the economics actually? And how can you show that this is effective for both reducing disaster risk, but also generating these other benefits? And we think this really can help with doing the project leads, but also the client, but also the technical experts on the team, with kind of better understand like what are the realistic options to do such analysis within the constraints that you have in a project. So the main content and scope you can see here on the screen. So it's really about kind of defining the audience, defining what is needed, but also kind of a quick rundown of the key concepts and methods. And then I think a very important part is actually the step to the practical application, where we kind of give provide a framework of like what can be done in the context of of a project and the constraints you have in terms of time and resources, and also what is the level of detail you need. And the scope in terms of nature-based solutions, what we work with in the guidance is this set of main types of interventions around forests, terraces, and slopes. I'm not going to read them all, but this is we try to be very practical and focus on those interventions. So if we analyze the value of nature-based solutions, it is really about, I think really the added value of this report is that we bring together approaches from different disciplines, from different academic disciplines, right? So there is like the risk assessment approaches, but combined with kind of the ecosystem service valuation approaches from environmental science. And if you want to value nature-based solutions well, you have to kind of bring those together in a single approach. So we quite heavily build on this framework that is kind of basically used both in the risk assessment and in the nature-based or in the ecosystem services research, where you just try to link what is the intervention, how does it change kind of the biophysical process, the way it actually regulates the different hazards, and how does that lead to benefits to people. And one very practical thing that I put here on the slides, what we try to do is, okay, for each of these nature-based solutions, how do they affect different processes that regulate like issues such as flooding, heat, landslide, etc., to be able to give really clear and pragmatic guidance on like how you can actually analyze those processes. And another key point, and I think Marta and both Marta and Stefan highlighted this, is of course, if you really want to understand the value of these solutions, you have to look beyond just the value of risk reduction or reducing flooding or heat. But it's really important to do an inclusive type of valuation that also looks at the other benefits. And of course, these can also be distributional and equity considerations, as Marta mentioned. So, for example, what some of these studies have done, some of the projects they've done is also look at job creation around nature-based solutions, or about inclusion and gender aspects, and like how, for example, certain vulnerable groups can benefit from those type of investments, by creating jobs for them. So that's a very important aspect. And what we do in this guidance is kind of help linking different benefits to different solutions, but also provide guidance on how you can actually value what are some of the methods that you can use. So I think that's the theoretical side now. So this is how you can do it, and this is how we can package the theoretical part in a sort of a clear and understandable way. But then there's the issue of course, different phases in a project require different analysis. So when you're more, you can imagine that when you're more like in the early project identification phase, it's more like a national level strategic assessment, whereas when you have already very clear designs for coastal protection interventions, like mangroves combined with embankments, for example, you need to do a very much more detailed analysis at the site level. So that's also something we try to address here by providing a kind of, these texts are quite small, apologies for that, but to provide a sort of a tiered approach where you, for each step in the analysis, identify what kind of level of detail you need, and also how you can leverage all the existing data that's already out there. Because often what we see when we look at the case studies, when you look at the good examples, often what the successful studies have done is used like an existing flood risk assessment with very detailed information that's already there, or I've used like natural capital accounts that were already developed for another project, for example, and kind of quickly repackaged and used that information for to inform a project. So this is really about two questions, no? So like, what is the objective? So like, what is the project phase? What's the decision context? And then also like how much data and resources are available. So and based on that, you can go for a more like secondary data-based approach, quick approach, or more local data dependent and detailed approach. So I think one of the key useful components, or like one of the most useful components of this report, is this collection of case studies. So we have, and here you see the visualization of the case studies. So on the left, we have 8 case studies in Jamaica, in Mozambique. We have 2 case studies in Seychelles, in Nepal, in Sri Lanka, Indonesia, and in China. And in these case studies, they also have a sort of a representative selection of different nature-based solutions types. So it covers everything from landslides, from coastal ecosystems, from urban nature-based solutions. And these case studies are structured following what you can see on the right of the slide here. So it's about like where in the project does this inform, what kind of decisions in the project does it inform, what kind of economic analysis is applied, what kind of nature-based solutions is it about protection, is it about rehabilitation, and what are some of the benefits that are considered in the analysis. So the case studies give very practical guidance on how they can be replicated. I think that's it from my side. I'm not sure if we want to try it again with the video, but just to say that, yeah, the guidelines are live now. You are more than welcome to download them either from naturebasedsolutions.org, which is the website of our program, and they're available there. Yeah, I would say just have a look, and I hope they're useful for you. Yeah, I think I'll stop there.
So thank you very much. So I'll just invite to join me first Nisha Krishnan. She's with the World Resources Institute. She's a director for climate resilience in the Africa region. And she has been working on advancing policy and practice on climate action. So a good person to have with us today. Our second panelist will be Sergio Perez from the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, a big supporter of nature-based solution. And finally, Julie Rosenberg. She's senior economist in the Office of the Regional Director for Sustainable Development in the Eastern Europe and Central Asia region, but just moving from the Latin American Caribbean region. So let me start with you, Sergio. As I was saying, the Swiss agency has been a big supporter of nature-based solutions, and I think one of the questions for us is what is your motivation, right? Why did you pick this as a priority for your support, and what it is that you try to push, right? What is the goal over the short run?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. I would like to first make a clarification, not to be confused with the Formula One pilot. So just to make sure, I don't have two jobs, just the only one for the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. Stefan, thanks for the question. Well, Switzerland has a long history of working with nature-based solutions, mostly for DRR. The 40% of the forests in the country are protected forests that are meant to be protect from avalanche, small town and small urban areas. So we have a long tradition of this kind of solutions, and that also went into our international cooperation, and we're very glad to have been one of the supporters through our contribution to the Resilience to Climate Change program that with the years turned into this nature-based solutions program. So we're very glad to have been able to support this. That having said of the importance of the protective of the nature-based solutions for protection for DRR, we also have to say that our Office for Environment and it's very clear that the nature-based solutions are not alone, are not enough. They have to be combined very often with green infrastructure or with green measures. So this just to make sure. Well, nature-based solutions are very interesting also because of the co-benefits. But they have to be, in many cases, to guarantee safety requirements, they have to be combined with green measures. So, but as was said here, well, I think the most interesting part of the nature-based solutions are its co-benefits. So the part on biodiversity, on provision of materials for construction or food, or perhaps new opportunities for job creation related to tourism, or and of course for climate, for carbon sequestration, climate regulation, and also in urban areas for microclimate, for combating heat. So. Well, yes, and in our international cooperation, we've had a long history. Well, in Central America, we did this compendium of engineering measures. We also supported the government of North Korea on bioengineering for DRR and better livelihoods. We have a new program in the Andean region for ecosystem management for DRR. And also in the humanitarian side, for example, for refugee camps in Bangladesh and Cox's Bazar, the use of bamboo to build refugee camps and also opportunities for job creation. This you can combine. So another interesting aspect is this, that you can approach these nature-based solutions either from the side of DRR or from the side of climate change adaptation. and also from poverty reduction. So in fact, it's the co-benefits that are might make this more attractive than, let's say, the traditional engineering measures.
Thank you, and thank you for your support on this. And I want to say this part of trying to get the case studies together to get lessons that others can use is something that's often more difficult to find resources for, but it's absolutely critical if we want to build this as a tool that everybody's using. It's good to do the pilots, but if the pilots don't get together into something which is more guidance everybody can use, it's very difficult. So thank you very much for the support for this work. This is greatly appreciated. I had told the team that I'm a terrible moderator, and I should have asked Marta to join me here. So I'm just forgetting one of my panelists. So this one I think will stay following me. I'm glad I had my phone that was just ringing furiously to remind me. So I'll get back to you in a minute. But first, Nisha, so you're focusing on Africa, of course, and that's sort of a case with limited capacity, but also maybe one of the biggest potential. So for you, what would be the priority in your region? And again, maybe focusing on the quick gains, right? What can we do now?
Thanks, Stefan, and thanks for having me on this panel. So I think just to pick up on this idea of capacity, I think one of the biggest challenges is just awareness, right? So I think one of the value adds for this report, for the work that Marta is doing, is that you actually have a database almost of use cases of where this is happening from a public perspective, and where this can happen also from a private perspective. So I think awareness and this integration, as you mentioned earlier, into how ministries of finance think about this, and how not from just an annual investment plan process, but also from a longer term trajectory process, as to the same ways that we are having actually challenges with even ministries of finance taking on the adaptation challenge. But how do you add nature-based solutions as a potential solution to actually potentially divest a little bit from the gray infrastructure solutions? Only how do you integrate this to their sort of agenda on climate resilient agriculture, on water issues, and use this as a way of actually increasing the uptake of NBS solutions? The second piece I would say is that from Marta's presentation, it was really interesting, obviously, how little private investment goes into this. And so the extent to which there is work that we can do to really bring domestic private sector in particular to appreciate the value of nature-based solutions, because at the end of the day, even if you have your institutional investors from an external perspective to the continent appreciating nature-based solutions, if you don't have sort of project developers and the private sector within the continent actually also appreciating MBS as a solution, as an opportunity to actually have sort of financial benefits from, not just economic benefits from, then I don't think we're going to get very far. So I think those two are probably both the easiest, also the hardest to do at the same time, because of the number of actors you have to get to. But that's, I think, where I would focus some of the work that you're already starting to do and think about.
And just very briefly, how are those solutions seen on the ground? Are they still seen as something which is like nice to have, or it started to move and
I would say I think it's starting to move. So I think there's, for example, there was the launch of the African Natural Capital Alliance not too long ago last year that really starts to push this idea that there's a financial benefit to the continent, to the countries, even in terms of tax revenue, in terms of infrastructure sort of development, that natural capital and nature-based solutions can actually promote mobilization of resources. So I think there's a lot more appetite for this. I think this is also coming out from the NBS for restoration sort of purposes, and the extent to which from a mitigation perspective, you can actually tap into carbon markets, right? So, but I think thinking and drilling down into the second order benefits of what restoration means in terms of water quality, in terms of water access, less land degradation, and reduction in landslides and such are all things that we can explore. But I think governments in general there, at least the countries that WRI works in, there's a lot of appetite and appreciation for this. It's just, well, what do you do once you've appreciated it? I think is the question.
Well, it's a good question that I'll ask Julie. So Julie, you have worked on this type of economic analysis. So maybe it could be useful to just have a little summary of that experience of how the economic analysis helps design the project and makes it implemented.
Yes, absolutely. So, well, thank you for inviting me. One of the case studies that's in the guidelines is a project I worked on some years ago at the World Bank in Colombo. So it was an urban development project. It was a big component on flood reduction. Most of it was engineering solutions, but there was a very small component that was on wetland protection. But the team didn't know yet what to do. And I joined the team at the very beginning of implementation. And we were working with the Land Reclamation Agency on the detailed design of the project. They had a hydrological model that was funded by GFDRR at the time, but all they could model about the wetlands was the flood retention capacity. And they could see in their model that it was very important, but their only idea was basically, oh, let's turn them into lakes so that we maintain the flood retention capacity because the wetlands were being lost to urban development that was uncontrolled. And so we came in and we said, why don't we do an economic analysis of protecting the wetlands? And we look at the trade-offs between protecting the wetlands, creating lakes, and letting urban development just sprawl. And we also looked at the opportunity cost of not letting urban development sprawl with Paulo's model there. It was a very interesting economic analysis. In the end, we showed that protecting the wetlands was the best solution from an economic perspective. And that was extremely useful to the clients. They said that having the economic angle was really useful to them. It allowed them to convince many more decision makers than protecting the wetland made sense. And they created a unit within the Land Reclamation Agency that was in charge of the wetlands. And they then funded another project to assess in more details all the benefits of the wetlands that we had not assessed under our project. So overall, that was a very successful experience. I think we came right at the right time with clients that were very interested and that just needed technical support, basically.
And maybe following up on this, I mean, one of the issue is that takes a lot of data, takes a lot of analytics. You don't always have the data available, but also the time and resources, the capacity on the ground. So the guidance is talking about what you can do in different contexts, with different amount of data and time and resources. But how do you advise about that? Like when you don't have enough, are they like second best solutions that can be mobilized?
Yes. So indeed, I have to say we didn't calculate the benefits in terms of biodiversity, for example, even though there are endangered species that live in those wetlands. But we did try to capture as many as we could. And because of all the uncertainty that was there, we used this approach that we call decision-making under deep uncertainty that I've been working with a lot at the World Bank. And so what we did is that we said, okay, we have these three options, protecting the wetlands, letting urban development sprawl, or creating lakes. And we stress tested all the options to a wide range of future scenarios, including climate change and including other factors. What we found was that protecting the wetlands was the low regret solution, which is often the case for a nature-based solution, which is the one that basically brings you reversibility, flexibility. If it turns out that flood risk is not so high in Colombo after all, you can always decide to, replace the wetlands by some buildings, but you cannot reverse it the other way. So using this DMDU approach or robust decision-making approach, we also showed the value of nature-based solution in terms of flexibility in decision-making.
Nisha, I'm getting back to you. Julie mentioned the institutional part of it, right? Having the people looking at the analysis and using it. Is that something that also helps bringing the communities, bringing all of the stakeholders and getting sort of a consensus on those solutions?
I think so, yes. I mean, I think without community stakeholders, especially when you're doing, say, MBS projects within commonly owned property, where public benefits are. Without community stakeholders, I don't think you have the long-term sort of success of the project, right? A lot of nature-based solutions does require management over time, and who has access, who derives benefits from that, I think really means that we need to have communities involved in that. And I would say that, for example, some of the restoration work that we've done from a WRI perspective, some things that we're involved in, that has also sort of led and emphasized, for example, entrepreneurship and employment opportunities from a nature-based solution sort of project, right? So how do you actually also have joint ownership of the investments that we're making in these communities? Because there is also a risk in the privatization or the valuation of natural capital benefits over longer term, is that it can become much more privatized, in which case who does the equity and who derives benefits from it can also change. And I do think that's something that we need to be aware of as we embark on this valuation sort of, or actually deepen our valuation agenda as we go forward. But I think without having community actors there as potential guardrails on that conversation, I think we can go a very different route than the one that we actually want to go on.
Thank you. And I'll get back to Sergio now, because as was expected, right? It's a really good idea to do nature-based solutions. So we have those guidelines now. Just can you share your thought about where should we go next, right? And that's the role of these guidelines, which can be useful at GFDRR and within the World Bank. But of course, I think the real prize is to get that beyond GFDRR and the World Bank, to just try to affect how people assess projects everywhere. So I don't know if you have ideas about how we can go to this next step.
I have some ideas, but I don't know how new they are. But because my first reflex is, well, for example, we at the SDC, we support, we contribute, and we work with GFDRR exactly to have this kind of leverage. So to be able to influence the World Bank. So you're already doing this, and you're ready. So this is not kind of new, but keep doing it, and you're doing it very well. So this one person influencing the investments by the World Bank and through the World Bank, as you call them, the clients or the countries, right? We don't call them clients. Sorry. Sorry. So, but yeah, through this work and your work with national governments and local governments and cities, well, trying to get this. But then I was reading the guidelines. I couldn't go into deep, and I think they're very good, but they need, I would say they need to there should be, or an idea would be kind of having some kind of workshops or dissemination strategy or support, so that people know how to use it and be able to use it. Perhaps it's good enough now, clear enough for World Bank staff, but perhaps for other partners it's not that easy. Then I would say, what about, well, extending it to other development banks? I don't know if you see them as partners or as competitors. But the regional banks is going to broader constituencies, and then well, another of the ideas. But you were talking, and you were very right. I said, okay, there is a business case for nature-based solutions that they offer so many co-benefits. So there might be, doing this business case might interest private sector to invest in them. But of course, you have to take care that these benefits go, as you said, go to the right persons, that local communities are involved, that the benefits go to them and not are hijacked by some perhaps external actors. So that was my last bit. Well, to involve local communities from the beginning and make sure that the benefits go to them. But so that's kind of the ideas, but I don't know how innovative they are. I don't know if that was new for you.
Well, maybe the team will want to come back on that in a moment. But before I turn to Marta, because I haven't forgotten you again, question for you on the work that GFDRR and WRI are doing together in Africa with a lot of partners. AFDB, GGKP, GIZ, and SIDA are also partners of this study to map the potential. Do you want to talk about this collaboration and where this is going?
Sure, thanks. And so this has been about a year long already, and we've got at least a few more months to go on this. But the premise of the study and the push to this was to really understand what the opportunities for nature-based solutions for adaptation were on the continent. And we sort of focused particularly on sort of MDBs and what they are doing on the continent, right? So what has worked? What are the challenges? What are sort of potential avenues that we can use to actually scale this up? Out of a survey and sort of desk interviews and project documents, we identified over 15,000 potential investments. So, or we actually, sent out the survey to 15,000 stakeholders, identified over 300 investments, of which we then went into a deep dive and have about 85 that are actually have MBS components, right? From mostly from a MDB perspective, and we're now expanding this into private sector investments as well going forward. This is valued, this is over the last, I think, 10 years, and we valued that about at $4.5 billion. And 64% of these 85 projects have been gray-green infrastructure projects. So again, I think low-hanging fruit as to where can you, at the margins, potentially integrate nature-based solutions. But then you have actually about 36%, so about just about 15 projects. Math is not my strong suit right now, but 36% of these projects are focused either on water or agriculture, water being the most sort of prominent sector where you can see nature-based solutions. I think part of the things that we've really identified through this work and through the deep dives into this, one is, I think, the lack of capacity to really translate a lot of the understanding around the potential benefits of nature-based solutions into sort of financial benefits, such that you can have resources flow. Second piece is guidelines and actually having standardized sort of benefits that you can evaluate from each project, right? So how do you actually scale this up? And if it's each development of a project really takes this dedicated due diligence process, how would you actually start to standardize some of this understanding of benefits such that you actually can scale this up faster? The other piece is the understanding of even what a bankable NBS project is, even from an MDB perspective, is where do you actually what are the standards for bankability? How do you actually get private sector to understand and have a common understanding for themselves of what bankability is from their perspective? And how do you actually have sort of technical assistance on the ground to speed up this process? We're still sort of, I think, working on our final report that will come out later this year. But the idea is that we're actually going to develop or do similar work with private sector investments to see where the opportunities are, particularly in the sub-Saharan Africa region, because of the fact that there is a lot of demand. And I think understanding that this could actually be a very beneficial way of addressing some of the infrastructure gap that you see within the continent as well.
Thank you so much. And I think it touched upon one of the questions that we had in the chat, differentiating the economic benefits from the financial benefits, and how do you make the case to bring the private sector? So same thing, like in the Q&A, we might want to come back on that. But we turn to Marta now. In terms of the research agenda, I think people would be really interested in having an idea of what are the main priorities for further work, and where do you see the progress in the academic world. And I think there is one very interesting question in the chat that I'll ask just right away, which is, if you did not find any cases where these nature-based solutions are not cost-effective, it's probably also because people don't do bad projects, right? But one of the question was, can we have a sense of what are the good projects, but also what are the bad projects, right? It's also important to try to identify the cases where it might not be the right solution, and it might not be something on which people are publishing a lot because it's not very popular, but it's still an important part. So I don't know if you have also a few thoughts about those projects which might not be the right one before they get implemented.
Yes, thank you. Very interesting questions. So actually, first, before starting, I actually wanted to contextualize a joke that Sergio made before about Formula One. Before the talk, I told him that my kids were very excited that I was meeting Sergio Perez because they're very big Formula One, and they asked me for an autograph, so I probably will ask. They're 5 and 8, so understandable. So in terms of directions of research, I think that's something that emerged very clearly when we went through all the articles and we screened them for recommendations. Something that emerged very clearly was that in 44% of articles, they indicated data limitations, and they indicated that often these data limitations were leading to very strong assumptions during the analysis and potentially uncertainty about some estimates. And these data limitations were essentially on the benefit side, because costs are easy to calculate. We have the markets. But for benefits, we have to be creative and we have to develop new methodologies to identify them and measure them. So something that we need to do, at least from the research side, is to really be more proactive in identifying benefits and evaluating them and measuring them. In this light, there is something, as we said, and this is in relation to the bad projects or in relation to something that Nishi was mentioning before about the long-term vision, the long-term trajectory. There was no monitoring reported in the studies that we analyzed. And I think the monitoring is an important aspect. It's expensive, but if it's included by design in the project, it would be very beneficial to understand whether some projects are good projects or not good projects and what the benefits are in the long term, because we would be able to monitor them. Then something else that is related to this is, but how do we do all this? Because from a scientific standpoint, so imagine yourself in a university. If you do it at the university level, you're going to be associated with a department. You can publish in certain journals. It can be very difficult to do interdisciplinary research, and to investigate benefits, you have to work with an interdisciplinary team. So this is another factor that we have to take into account. The good news is that now there are more and more grants to support research, interdisciplinary research, and there is immense interest in nature-based solutions. So this is happening. I think we are really at a tipping point in terms of where the research is going. And I would also like to mention that from the point of view of international organization, but this is going to be very beneficial for scientists as well. I was speaking with Boris, and his group here at the World Bank is trying to create a consortium of private companies and universities to consolidate project level data on cost and benefits. This is very valuable. We have to create really human capital to share information about cost and benefits. There is another aspect that I wanted to mention. This is just to create really a constellation of data points for you in terms of where the research is going, which is that nature-based solutions are very useful in mitigating climate change. But I mean, we know we need to measure all these implications. But one aspect that we have to also consider is that since the 2007 IPCC, we know that ecosystems are being affected by climate change. So in academia, we have also started looking at how the effectiveness may be affected by climate change itself. And this is just part of the research. But it's important research, and it's exciting research to do. And we have already started working in my university in interdisciplinary teams with geosciences to integrate these two aspects of the story. So I hope that was helpful.
Thank you so much. And so now we have received a few other questions. So this question on the especially the cases where NBS might not be the right approach were from Stefano Paggiola and Ko Takashi. We have a few other questions which maybe I'll just read here, and then we can just go through the panel once more to try to touch on them. And I think they tend to be around the same topic of the challenges in implementing nature-based solutions. So I understand a lot of the studies are like ex-ante assessments. So if you implement well your nature-based solution, this is how much great benefits you'll get. But what about the cases where it's not implemented in the right way? And so the questions were about from Frida Rhodes on all of the technical challenges and the need for more maintenance to just make sure the benefits are maintained over time. And we had also a question on the time it takes for the benefits to materialize. So it can be longer when you use nature-based solution instead of pure engineering based solution. And finally, maybe a last point from me. A few of you just sort of like opposed nature-based solutions and engineering solutions. As a French engineer, I just wanted to ask about if that distinction is really useful, or if it's more like the engineering solution should bring nature more into how they are designed. But without trying to make this distinction between those two dimensions. So maybe we'll go into the same order. We'll start with you, Sergio, then Nisha, Julie, and Martha will give you the last word.
So it's about implementing, about the time it takes to get the co-benefits, and then last time was confronting these two. No, perhaps let's start with this. In our idea, and what we do in Switzerland, it's not confronting them, but it's combining them, and to combine them, you have to go into the detail and see, okay, what are the what is possible with network-based solutions, and of course taking into account the co-benefits, but what not, and then how some reinforcements of, for example, for gully erosion, if you can do it everything through vegetation, or if you need some more agavian or structures, you have to look, but you have to not confront them, but combine the measures. So, and then perhaps for the question about time, well, this is in fact very important, but not only for nature-based solutions, because always you have to take into account the net present value of investments, and when are you investing, and when are you going, and the cost of money, and that depends a lot, that changes a lot in each context, and there are contexts where the interest rates are very high, so investing in something that you will get the benefits in the future, it's very uncertain. So this leads, of course, to short-termism, but it's something you have to take into account because every context is different.
Thank you, Nisha, and maybe in your region, everything is urgent, right? So.
Yeah. So I think maybe that last question first as well. I mean, to the point, I think what we're trying to do is to make sure that nature is one of the options within engineering, right? That I think we do just as much analysis to have a nature-based solutions project as we do to a hard infrastructure or gray infrastructure project, right? And I don't think we can underestimate the amount of sort of modeling and other things that we have to do. And so I think it is in some ways, it is an option within the engineering toolbox, and that's kind of how we should be thinking about it and potentially how we should be teaching it going forward as well. In terms of the maintenance question, I think it's interesting that we talk about maintenance for MBS, but not as much then in comparison to gray infrastructure, which also we undervalue, right? So in that sense, if we were to actually fully sort of evaluate the cost of maintaining an MBS project versus a hard infrastructure project, I think the actual cost of maintaining a hard infrastructure project over time, I think we might actually end up still lower on MBS potentially, but I'm not a modeler, so again, don't have the data for that. But I think that again is not maybe a dichotomous answer anymore as well. In terms of the benefits aspect, I agree. And I think that's the reason why we don't have as much private flows into it, is because of the longer term sort of nature of it. I do wonder if there's a case to be made in terms of the implicit liabilities that both private sector and governments are taking on by not integrating longer term benefits into their decision making. Because, for example, you do have at the end of the day, governments are responsible for any sort of failure, and I guess within their economies, and especially from a disaster perspective. And if you have sort of better maintained or more resilient MBS solutions available, then wouldn't a government actually be reducing it as implicit liabilities over time if we were to really think about this? So the longer time dimension could be actually a factor within at least public financing. I guess for private financing, as you were saying, if you have higher interest rates, you have other sort of reasons for why you might not be investing MBS, which I don't know what the answer to addressing that is. And I think I don't know yet. Thanks.
Thank you. Now, I was thinking of this because being in Brazil last week, where private sector investors mentioned the role of concessional finance to create grace periods. They're saying, like, for afforestry, it takes a long time to deliver. And so the way to provide concessional finance is more bringing a grace period so that you don't have to reimburse your loan too quickly, instead of reducing the interest rate, for instance. I thought it was an interesting dimension for NBS. Julie?
Yeah, maybe first on the trade-off between, or the dichotomy between gray and green infrastructure, I agree. I think they're just complementary. In Colombo, they were running out of engineering options, which is why they were considering the wetlands. I mean, at least affordable engineering options. But On the question of the maintenance costs and the fact that the benefits can be in the long run, I think it depends also if it's conservation versus recreation or restoration of ecosystems. If you're conserving ecosystems, the benefits are already there, you're trying to protect them, but the costs often are low enforcement, and those can be quite high, or they can be political costs, which was also the case in Colombo. I don't think we have great solutions for this, but in Colombo, what we did within the project was to create some parks around the wetlands for people to come do like bird watching and jogging and things like that, which already reduces a little bit the incentives for like unlawful urban development. But yeah, you know, the deforestation issues in Brazil, it's also all a law enforcement issue, and I'm not sure what we have to offer. And the costs are quite high to assess.
Martha.
Thank you. Yes, I think I'm gonna just agree a lot with what has been said, and I would like to emphasize two aspects. The first is that the way in which we measure cost benefit matters a lot. So if we consider an engineering solution, so I agree that there is complementarity between the type of solutions, and probably the landscape is more of a landscape with gradients of integration between the different types of strategies. But if we compare engineering solutions and nature-based solutions, we should be very careful, because in evaluating engineering solutions, often the time horizons used in cost benefit are shorter than the time horizons used for nature-based solutions. And so essentially, we cut off from the analysis a long stream of benefits. You can have infinite benefits in terms of timeline with nature-based solutions. So the cost benefit should take that into account. And as Sergio was mentioning, the discount rate matters. So when we were reviewing studies about cost-benefit analysis and there was one discount rate and it was 12%, that's a problematic approach. There should be robustness checks with multiple discount rates, also lower discount rates that take into account long-term benefits, or give them some weight and doesn't just drop them down to zero in the calculation. So the way calculations are done is also important to compare the benefits of these different types of solutions. So that was just the technical aspect that I thought was very important that Sergio mentioned. And yes, I also wanted to emphasize the importance of conservation versus restoration. Conservation is very cheap, and we shouldn't just eliminate something that is already there to replace it with an engineering solution without taking into account the long-term benefit of the existing green infrastructure. So these were just some considerations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And so thanks to all of our panelists. I mean, I like this idea also of the hybrids mixing of options between nature-based and engineering, because I think there is sometimes sort of a feeling that high-income countries can have the fancy dikes and hard infrastructure, and then in low-income countries you have nature-based solution. I think presenting them as sort of the high-tech solution that brings everything together is making it more attractive than sometimes the second best option that people have in mind. So it's more than just a language issue. I think it's important in how we sell them. We now turn to you, Niels, for closing remarks. I think you should, because we're using all of the other chairs.
Do I need to do anything to... Is it on? Yeah, sounds like it. All right, just briefly, well, certainly thanks to all of you at the table, including the moderator. I think you did a fantastic job, Stefan. I hope you get a sense, those of you in the room, those of you connected, a little bit about how we're trying to operate at GFDRR, the role we're trying to fill. You got voices here at the table that come at the opportunities and sometimes challenges related to nature-based solutions from different angles. It's very important for us to try to bring in all of those experiences, that know-how, in how we then turn around, and maybe Julie in particular at the table, who represents the world banker who's out there working with a city or working with a country to try to enable them to do better nature-based solutions as part of their risk management. So it's really, you might have picked up on some of Boris's slides, there was one slide where there's a bunch of numbers, And a few of those numbers were saying something like 550 knowledge pieces and more than 100 experts, and those in one of the small boxes. No, and that's just a few numbers. That means that we are attempting to play that connecting role, because we are focusing on a topic that, compared to disaster risk management more broadly, is quite specific. We have a potential, and I believe an ability, to bring in the right kind of people in the right opportunity on the ground in the right moment that may enable a city like Colombo to actually save its wetlands, not because we are preaching that it's good for biodiversity, but because we are helping them see that it's good for their risk management objectives. And that is, in essence, what we try to do and how we try to operate, and we look forward to continue to do it with you. I believe anyone in this room is probably interested in nature-based solutions, which means that if we're not already working with you, we soon will be, and we look forward to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Niels, and thanks again to our panelists and Boris and all of the team who prepared the reports. I'm giving the floor to you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, and thank you to all of you and Niels for the wrap up. Amazingly, we are on time. So this is a challenge for the next set of speakers. I would like to call my colleagues Edward Anderson and Pierre Zanowski, and I'm sorry if I already butchered your last name. They are going to talk to us about the work that we are doing on enhancing decision-making through analytics and about harnessing digital innovation for inclusive and sustainable risk management.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, it's my pleasure to present to you the Harnessing Digital Innovation. Pierre and I are going to tag team this. I'll give you an overview of our strategy. This covers several of the technical lines. It's linked to the digital earth, but also many of our technical lines of work are recurring demands for sort of faster, better, more data. So part of the strategy is really how do we try and meet that demand. So, the clicker working? This one. Okay. So if we try to summarize what is our problem statement, I think when we look at sort of the demand from GFDRR, historically, we've always tried to be shifting away from this corrective risk management approach that we know is very expensive, and as far as possible invest in prevention, which has a much better return on investment. But underlying all of this effort, and it's the first sort of strategic objective of GFDRR and Hyogo framework, the Sendai framework, is better risk information. When the risk data is really old or out of date, there's an inherent bias that we can only really manage what we measured, and usually we measured it 10 years ago. So we're fixing the mistakes of 10 years ago, and usually we only measured it for the sort of the more formal parts of the economy and society. So we're also fixing it for those middle income areas. And the most vulnerable development is happening unplanned. It's not literally on the map. And as such, it's data scarce, it's expertise scarce. And then it's much more costly to try and address this 10, 20 years later when you need to resettle communities or invest in drainage on slopes that have already been deforested and built up. So we're looking about how do we sort of make data more affordable that is faster, better, cheaper, but also that enables us to invest much more in preventative risk management. And our traditional approach has often been, well, we budget for data when we have a large investment project. But then we tend to budget in this expert-centric, top-down type of methodology, right? We hire the world's top experts, and they come with very robust scientific models that are quite data-hungry. So this is a picture, believe it or not, of the city center of Dar es Salaam, where I used to live for 8 years. And the two gentlemen in the boat are from the Netherlands, top experts in inundation and in geomorphology or erosion. And they're here to help us address the recurring and worsening flooding that Dar es Salaam has. And this river, the Mzimbazi, has never been instrumented. We don't have historical rainfall data. They're here to look where to install data loggers. They put in a radar gauge upstream for flood early warning, which was eventually stolen and stopped working. They've been trying to establish the datum. So this is kind of not only expensive, but expert-centric. During COVID, they couldn't travel. So if you have a less well-resourced city, how do you replicate this kind of model that is data-hungry, expertise-hungry, And how do you sustain it and maintain it locally? So part of our strategy is really to invest in local people, local devices, open access, right? So this is the bottom-up type of methodology. How much of the recurring data needs can we actually collect locally with local people? And this is a picture of university students in Dar es Salaam using their own phones, Samsung phones that have a GPS and a camera and an internet connection to geo-collect drainage information. In this particular case, they're taking pictures of culverts and drains in these informal communities, and hundreds of kilometers of drains were collected in this way. And this approach, I think, lines up very well. We started it thinking about this way. We've been trying to embed these principles for a while now, but it lines up very well with the midterm review findings and recommendations of the Sendai framework. And there's many relevant recommendations, but I think sort of a few key ones. It talks about thinking of data platforms as systems. Think about the life cycle of the data. Think about how it's going to be interoperable. So also work with more than just your traditional data users and beneficiaries, but think of a much broader ecosystem and really leverage a digital inclusion agenda. So particularly working with disadvantaged groups, with indigenous communities, with women, with youth, with the disabled. And that's, I think, very, very much part of how we think about it. So we think that there are fantastic opportunities and innovations at the global level for new data sources that can be automated, that can be lower cost, standardized across our countries. So Earth observation from space and also from drones, in combination with tools like artificial intelligence, which can automate change detection, can make the process of faster data, more data, easier data, a really good prospect. But unless you maximize local participation, then we will struggle with this, making it available and actionable and accepted by local communities. So our approach is very much to invest in the bottom-up models that can take advantage of these new global resources. So this is an example of one of the cool, opportunities out there. This is called the World Settlement Footprint. We have a report that looks at some of the applications within our portfolio. It's a measure of the building footprint across the world. But what's interesting about this is the timeliness. In yellow, you see new buildings in Dar es Salaam in the last 6 months. Typically, it's like 10 years old data. And so now we can actually begin to see the patterns for growth. So what you see here, obviously, in orange, it's 12 months, and in red, it's 24 months. So you see the western expansion of the city is really driving a lot of the environmental degradation, 10% urban forest cover loss per year. If the pointer works, does it? Okay, the pointer's not quite working, but that area with the boat and the experts, right over here, this is a mangrove area. So obviously nature-based solutions is a recurring demand for better data. Dar es Salaam has lost 40% of its mangroves in the last 10 years, and that's the area that's flooding all the time. But it's a function of deforestation, sediment, erosion, lack of waste collection, inability of the drainage and the river networks to convey that water and sediment. This kind of data allows us to see that trend happening in near real time, rather than looking at typically 10 years ago. We can also begin to do this for population distribution now. So it's an order of magnitude improvement in the resolution of how we see where the beneficiaries are. We can begin to really see at the ward level, at neighborhood level, where the beneficiaries, where the need is, that exposure. And that is standardized across the world now. This is a product that's co-developed with German Aerospace based on a lot of European satellite data. So we built in partnerships. So the Digital Earth program is called the Digital Earth Partnership. It's leveraging partnerships with data and technology providers globally. So we have ESA as an anchor partner, and we have a secondee from ESA who's here. But we're also investing in partnerships with practitioners and particularly in skills providers. So a lot with universities that are teaching these low-cost local digital tools as well. So it's both the bottom-up implementation as much as sort of global resources. And so a lot of our reports are really written in partnership with some of these partners. So the World Settlement Footprint, that image of Dar es Salaam you saw, is with German Aerospace. And that's available as well if you want to look at some of the use cases of better exposure data. We've also been working with Deltares in the Netherlands on responsible use of artificial intelligence in disaster risk management with the UN Agency for Disaster Risk Reduction on digital public goods, categorizing some of the approaches to integrating data collection into traditional public works programs as one business model for how can we maintain data, update it, use local communities to provide a great deal of it. And then investing in communities of practice around global standards and other digital public goods, such as the Risk Data Library. The last category of partnership I think is really important, and we'll have a panelist online talking about this, is the Resilience Academy. I showed quite a few universities there. These are universities in the global north that are partnering with different countries and institutes in the global south to really align several things at once. They're trying to integrate curricula, open source, online, free curricula of what are the local innovations that could be harnessed and relatively quick wins that can be accredited in the curricula for geography, disaster management, town planning, to really internalize and create data for particular local sort of real world problems. So we've been in Tanzania, this has existed for about 5 years, funded by UK aid, and now with the European Commission and GIZ resources. I think it's about 500 students a year get trained in class, and then they get deployed on these digitization campaigns known as the industrial placement, where they're actually creating data, and they're doing mass digitization campaigns. The drainage picture was one example. Tracking trees and urban canopies can be another one. And so in this way, you're aligning the education resources of building human capital and capacity with the digitization objective of creating a data ecosystem with the sectoral demand, whether it's the basin management project or the urban upgrading project. So I think this is a really exciting model that we're keen to try and replicate. But now Pierre will actually walk you through some practical examples. Over to you, Pierre.
Thank you, Edouard. All right. So you already spoke to that example of using Resilience Academy for urban vegetation mapping. So actually that one was in Tanzania and Sierra Leone, so where we mobilize students, more than 1,000 students, to actually label the model. So because when you're developing a artificial intelligence model, you need to train the model, you need to validate and test the model. So we needed that, let's say, in situ data validation. And so thanks to the fact that we are already that connections established with universities, we are able to mobilize, but also to retribute those students, those young people to do the work. And that has been done in conjunction with also people actually taking care of trees, so a tree planting program, and taking pictures of all the trees. So not only we have the baseline information to monitor and to follow the urban vegetation from the sky, let's say, but also we had the people on the ground really following the process with another digital technologies. Okay. So next one, here in Kinshasa. So as you might know, Kinshasa is going to be one of the most populated cities in the world by 2050. A lot of, and almost the totality of the city unplanned. So here, the support was both on helping the projects to get better urban layers. So we are talking about drainage, we are talking about solid waste. Again, we are talking about trees to also consider nature-based solution. And what we are currently doing, so we are going to mobilize not only students, but also young people, 500 what we call digital workers, to inform the Kinelenda project, including the solid waste management component. So they are going to actually trace maps of the drainage system. They are going to map the solid waste, and that will inform another activity as part of the Kinelenda project, hiring 90,000 public workers who themselves will clean the streets. So I think that example is a nice one because you have the interaction between the digital workers and also the public workers. It's going, of course, to inform short-term intervention, but the idea also is to then have data layers that will be part of the GIS unit that we're also supporting through the Kinelenda project. Another example, again in Kinshasa, done by our colleagues from the Disaster Risk Analytics, is to there study the the disruption of transport, public transport, but also informal transport, the disruption of floods on transport. So what they have done, they have mapped public transport and informal transport thanks to the use of mobiles and GPS, so that they had maps of those different systems, and then an overlay with flood, they could measure the disruptions. And you can also imagine how you could then incorporate the map of the drainage to have a better mobilization of your drainage, a better mobilization of your floods, and then a better mobilization of your impact. And both actually informing that big investment, the Kinanda project is about $500 million. Next one, I would go quicker. So here we are in the Caribbean. It's a 1 million grant from GFDRR. And here the idea is to support the GIS units of the islands to continue to support them to ensure they have a sustainable GIS entities, and then to expose them to what we call disruptive technologies. So again, artificial intelligence or drone mapping, so that they can incorporate those innovations into the way they operate. So I will give you an example in Dominica. So in Dominica, Hurricane Maria in 2015, just a year after, they claimed they would like to become the most resilient country in the Caribbean. And they have that indicator that they would like 90% of the housing stock to be resilient. But what does that mean to measure and housing stock and to make sure that's actually resilient? So what we are going to do is to help Dominica to define the indicators and to also get the data. So thanks to machine learning, to the fact that we also acquired drone imageries with World Bank operations, we'll be able to have a first baseline of information of the rooftop conditions and maybe also going street view. And then the idea is to provide also the methodology to the government so that they can do that on a regular basis and so that they can also monitor the progression. Heat waves, heat islands, there is a huge increase in the demand. Of course, we all know why, on having good data on it, not only data for today, but also data for tomorrow. So here, the challenge is to be able to capture information, so on the temperature, on the humidity, and also on what we call the radiation. So one of our colleagues, Nick, has developed that methodology together with some companies, and we are deploying the methodology that is based on the people actually going into the streets with the sensors, and at the end of the day of the project, you have a heat map where you can see really the exposure to it depending on where you live. And we have done that, for instance, in South Africa, and you can really see what we call the heat apartheid. And depending on the conditions of the household, you can really see the heat is greater in the poorest areas. Another one on rapid damage assessment, where we are using a lot of digital innovation as well. So on the left, that one was for the tsunami caused by a landslide in Indonesia in 2018, where we used social media to validate some of the damage that we could see. On the right, more recently, the earthquake in Turkey, where we used mobile device data so that we could see the movement of population just after the disaster. The risk data library, so the idea of that project from GFDRR is to develop tools and standards for people to work better with disaster risk information. And one of the challenges that we are facing all in the World Bank is how to package the different sources of risk data. And so you have the vulnerability component, you have the exposure, you have the hazard. And so we have developed a standard to do that. And not only we have deployed the standard within the bank, but the idea is also to support others to use that standard so that together we can replicate methodologies and better, let's say, share disaster risk information. And the last one, so our first cohort of fellows. So the idea here is to develop a program, a fellowship program, to train data scientists from climate vulnerable countries. So those data scientists that already have the skills to do data analytics, to expose them to what it means to work for the World Bank, and to expose them to our methodologies, and also to have them to support concrete World Bank operations. And so I'm pleased to introduce you to our first 7 risk data fellows. If the video works, let's give it a try.
I'm Ankita from India. I have pursued my PhD in urban flood management and have done my bachelor's in architecture and master's in urban and rural planning. I am working on 2 states, Assam and Rajasthan. In Rajasthan, we are working on drought resilience enhancement of the capital city Jaipur, whereas in Assam, we are working on 3 cities to enhance their flood resilience.
My name is Waba Mambo. I'm from the Democratic Republic of the Congo in the eastern part. Actually, I'm working in the hazard and vulnerability analysis project in DRC. And the goal of our project actually is to assess the exposure of local community to those different hazards and to identify different mitigation strategies.
Hi, I'm Isabel Pinzon from the Philippines. I am an incoming PhD researcher focusing on the applications of machine learning and Earth observation for socioeconomic development and humanitarian response. So essentially, using AI-based solutions, we plan to extract meaningful information on housing stock and vulnerability indicators, enable more timely and evidence-based decision-making to service of the most vulnerable segments of society.
Hi, my name is Zia. I'm from Bangladesh. I'm currently working with the Poverty and Equity team of the World Bank Group of Bangladesh. The team seeks to systematically develop a database by combining all the disaster and climate-related data and with the socioeconomic indicators.
I'm Paolo Magnata from the Philippines. In the World Bank, I'm working with the Philippines Transport team to enhance the use of climate risk data on a transport and connectivity project with the country's Department of Public Works and Highways. The project's area of interest is the island group of Mindanao, which is considered as the Philippines' food basket. However, despite its importance, there's severe underinvestment in the area due to armed conflict in certain areas. The project aims to enhance the transport infrastructure in strategic and relatively peaceful areas and ensure that risks, both natural and man-made, are mitigated.
I'm Bradley Riley, and I'm from Johannesburg, South Africa. I'll be contributing to this project by developing a flood risk profile of the Karlsbredt while working closely with a team of highly experienced urban, land, and resilience specialists from the World Bank. So the primary objective of this project is to develop an integrated water management approach to improve this river restoration by identifying flood risk profiles, enhancing water quality, and unlocking potential developments along the river.
My name is Fadli. I'm from Jakarta, Indonesia. Currently, I'm supporting the economic development team at the World Bank office in Jakarta in mapping the climate change vulnerability for more than 75,000 villages in Indonesia. We will build a dashboard that will visualize the characteristic of vulnerability to climate change. Thank you.
This fellowship program is supported by the Swiss Re Foundation. This is the first one, and I'm hoping we'll be able to do it again. So actually, we have the pleasure to have one of our fellows here today with us, Isabel. If you want to join us for the panel, together with Alex Chunet, my colleague from HISA. And we should actually we have a slide for that. And online we have 2 other panelists, Merci Mbise from the Tanzania Resilience Academy, and also Nura Kawan, a senior GIS consultant, also working with us on the Digital Earth Partnership. So I'm going to be now the moderator. So maybe I will start by opening the mic. First question to Isa. So you're a machine learning specialist. Until recently, you were part of the Artificial Intelligence for Earth Observation Future Lab in Munich. You're from Philippines, Manila, and now you're working with us as a risk data fellow. But you have also been involved with the Women Who Code Manila and also with the nonprofit Climate Change AI. So could you tell us a bit more about your engagement to include more women in data science, but also more data science in climate? Thanks.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Pierre, and good afternoon, everyone. Okay, so with regards to the first question, which is to involve more women in data science. So as part of the Women Who Code network and as tech lead of the ML and AI group at Women Who Code Manila, my role is to facilitate and organize events where women can come together to learn about best practices and the latest trends in data science. So this includes holding monthly study group sessions where members, usually beginners, we teach them how to use tools like Python, Jupyter Notebooks, GitHub, Google Earth Engine to conduct data analysis and also develop their own machine learning projects. We also host events like Women in Data Science seminar series where we invited leading Filipina data scientists, like PhD researchers, in data science practitioners from the industry, machine learning engineers, to speak about their experiences as women in STEM, and also about their career progression and the challenges that they face. So some of the discussion points that come up, for example, is the lack of representation of women in data science and in STEM. And so Women Who Code, for example, does try to engage with young women, high schoolers, college students, try to show them that women can indeed excel in this field, in the field of data science, and become leaders in the field of tech. Other challenges that come up are, for example, are challenges in career progression, of course, gender-based discrimination. And so in conclusion, there is a need for better inclusion, since we've seen time and time again that the integration of diverse perspectives and backgrounds does lead to better solutions overall. So that's for the first, question. The second question on how to include more, how to involve data science in climate change solutions. So as part of the Climate Change AI core team, as a member of the content committee, we try to develop educational material, content like courses, tutorials, blog posts with the goal of increasing public awareness of AI solutions in developing climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation solutions. How can AI be used to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and also help society adapt better to the adverse effects of climate change? So through our summer school initiatives and climate change workshops that are held in conjunction with major AI conferences such as NeurIPS, ICML, and ICLR, we have experts submit tutorials that teach users about things like extreme weather forecasting, using time series machine learning-based techniques, optimization techniques, ML-based optimization techniques for optimizing energy consumption. And personally, I've also developed some of my own tutorials on using machine learning and Earth observation for land use and land cover mapping. So maybe I can talk a little bit more about the space of AI and Earth observation. So we've seen, as Pierre presented, the major advances in AI coupled with increasing availability of Earth observation have unlocked these unprecedented opportunities to advance solutions in climate change, as well as other pressing challenges of our time, like poverty, food security. And I've seen that AI and machine learning is very effective at filling in data gaps, extracting meaningful information from satellite images, Earth observation data, information like the locations of vulnerable communities based on rooftop characteristics, rooftop conditions, to help government institutions and humanitarian organizations make more evidence-based and more timely decisions. So in integrating data science into climate change solutions, I find that it does help to understand existing decision-making workflows. So based on my experiences in machine learning and AI, ML and AI isn't really meant to supplant or to replace existing processes, but to take existing processes, help make them faster, more efficient, and more scalable. And so I just want to end my session by saying that in order to narrow the gap between data action and impact does require a strong collaboration between technical experts like ourselves, policymakers, social scientists, economists, decision makers, local relevant stakeholders, and of course, the affected communities. So that's how I would answer that question.
Thanks a lot, Isa. And we were discussing actually during the lunch the fact that as a researcher, you don't have often that opportunity to be exposed to politicians, to the decision makers, to development practitioners. So that's an opportunity for you to see how it works concretely and on the ground. So now I'd like to turn to Mercy, who is online. So Mercy, hope you are with us. So Mercy Mbise is connecting from Tanzania. She has been leading the Resilience Academy initiative. She has a background in, that's not Mercy, that's Nula, but she has a background in computer science, and she is currently leading the computer science and engineering department at the University of Dar es Salaam. So Mercy, could you tell us about your experience in bringing together the digital innovation aspect and the resilience aspect? And what was the reception from the students involved into that program? And I hope you're online.
Yes, I'm online, Pierre. Thank you. Good evening.
Excellent. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Greetings from Dar es Salaam and the university in particular. The Resilience Academy model was introduced to us via our partner, University of Turku, but also from the World Bank. And the opportunity actually came and we grabbed it with both hands because it was just the right time that the university is turning into adopting a challenge-based or challenge-driven mode of teaching. So the Resilience Academy model was there, and it helped us to expose students to real-life challenges using simple, open source, accessible digital tools like mobile phones, like as Edward explained before. And basically, the students received it with both hands. But on the side of the university, as we are moving into the challenge-based real-life experience way of learning, the platform or the Resilience Academy model has given us a good chance, a good platform to address societal challenges using students. We have several elements of the Resilience Academy, and one of the beneficial one has been industrial training, where we take a massive number of students and they're engaged in data collection, but also they don't only do data collection, the whole process of data collection and curation and management, they get exposed into those skills. But also we have another element of the Resilience Academy, which is online open source resources or online materials where students and staff use and they complement in their teaching of the courses. So basically we align some of these elements or learning resources into the current curricula. But also we do microworks where those Resilience Academy, we call them Resilience Academy alumni, or some of them are still students, they can actually engage in microworks. And we did this, I think during COVID. So it's very simple because students, wherever they are, they can actually use their mobile phones and collect data. So Resilience Academy, in a nutshell, has have a very good reception, and we've done a wonderful job, especially with the students. We have now a very large number of students, young youth, very energetic, who can use digital skills and digital devices in solving societal, or rather climate risk challenges in their society. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Merci. And maybe Edouard wanted to. Yeah.
Hi, Merci. Good
Hi.
to see you
Edward.
online.
Hi, Edward.
You mentioned it's a massive number of students. I just wanted to get some context. I believe it's something like 500 a year that are getting trained in the classroom. But how many students have you had so far, the overall program?
Yeah.
Just a number.
Overall, I think it's about 1,400 so far. From all the universities that are participating in Resilience Academy. There's 4 universities in Tanzania: University of Dar es Salaam, Ardhi University, State University of Zanzibar, and also Sokoine University of Agriculture. So about 1,400 students.
Okay, thanks a lot. And just to remind, so that partnership is between Dar es Salaam, the University of Turku in Finland,
yes,
ourselves, and the Hope, and we are looking forward to be able to adapt in other countries and context.
Yes.
Now to Alex. So Alex, you are the secondee of the European Space Agency to the World Bank, but also my colleague at GFDRR. The World Bank and ESA have recently renewed their memorandum of collaboration. So simple question, why a partnership between the bank, the World Bank and ESA? And also how does that partnership address the question of digital inclusion for digital disaster risk management? Sorry.
Thanks, Pierre, and happy to be here today. So essentially, the European Space Agency has been partnering with the World Bank for more than 15 years. And this collaboration has really been centered on trying to promote the use and adoption and integration of Earth observation technologies within operational processes and financing. And we do not try to do this just to be fancy, but we try to do this because this will generate an increase in efficiency and impact of development finance. I would say another overarching objective has been to try to tackle the new space for development paradigm. Not that many people know, but actually 21 countries in Africa have either a space agency or a space program. And those space agency or space programs are really centered on environmental challenges and capacity. So there is a huge demand for more frequent and reliable data at large scales and also in capacity. And that's why we really, through this collaboration, try to achieve and kind of close this gap in terms of access and adoption of Earth observation technologies. So I think what we've realized throughout the years is that we need to combine, in order to achieve this objective, really a top-down and a bottom-up approach. ESA, so the European Space Agency, has mobilized a program which is called the Global Development Assistance Program, through which we provide support in the elaboration of products and services. And this is somehow support that is provided to development projects and to World Bank teams in the elaboration of fit-for-purpose products and services based on Earth observation. So that could be seen somehow closer to the top-down. But in order really to achieve the sustainable adoption of those tools, we need to match this and complement this with a bottom-up approach, something that really works and is based on local inclusion, local participation, co-creation. And that's really why we work closely with the Digital Earth Partnership in order to combine those top-down and bottom-up approaches and achieve the sustainable long-term adoption of those technologies. And of course, GFDRR has proven to be a great home for this, because GFDRR is a unit that is close to the operations, that had the technical expertise when it comes to deploying this kind of digital technologies and also developing them and applying them with local communities and based on local participation, and with also this ambition to tackle recurrent needs in order to have an impact on the whole portfolio of projects at large scale. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Alex. So we have ESA, we have the satellites, and on the other end of the spectrum, we also have the communities of mappers. And together with us today is Nuala Cowan. She's a co-founder of the Youth Mappers community. She's also our colleague at GFDRR and a professor of geography at the George W. Washington University. So Nuala, and I hope you're still online. So when we say digital inclusion for disaster risk reduction, what does that evoke to you, and how you think we could be even more inclusive?
Everybody, hi Pierre. I hope you can hear me okay.
We can hear you.
Yeah, okay. So when I think of digital inclusion, I first of all think of practical access to that digital technology. Looking at solutions that are affordable, that they're accessible, not only the actual tech itself, but also instruction in how to use that tech for whatever the problem may be itself. And make sure that the instruction itself is also accessible and that it's at the right level for the individual that you're dealing with. And even though we're talking about digital technology, it's not always about the tech itself as well. You know, if you're approaching a project to collect data for disaster resilience within a community, you have to be inclusive of that entire community, and not everybody will wield a device in that situation. You have to have a methodology or a workflow that takes everybody's skills, everybody's perspectives into account. So while it might be overwhelmingly digital or technical in nature, you need to have an opportunity to get everybody's input. I've worked on projects with the university before where we were working in Misco in Guatemala, and we worked with a local university, students who had come from that particular community, and they actually paired up with grandparents and older members of the community, and they worked in pairs to collect data using digital devices. And, you know, even though some of the older members of the community didn't get into the tech as much because they had such experience and perspective on the events, they were able to combine that with the students' skills and work together. And I think it's really important in these projects that you have the right communication and the right preparation to make sure that everybody kind of has their place there. When you are dealing from a very tech perspective, so again, working with university students, like the example that Mercy gave, you have to look at failure points in your tech. There's no point introducing like a lot of workflows that are very internet dependent when that's going to be a choke point. So having kind of suitable solutions and then having backups when those things fail you and they become an issue. Also, in terms of practical access, you know, we think about the individual, we think about communities, and then we look at our government counterparts that we work with. You know, there are very traditional workflows for how we do a lot of these things, and I think it's kind of on us to demonstrate that these bottom-up approaches, that they can be sustainable, they can be useful, and I think having structures like things like the Resilience Academy, having things like youth mappers that are there, that we can provide funding to students, we can provide training, we can provide that kind of stableness in order to kind of help, you know, build kind of that next generation of mappers and next generation of students.
Thanks a lot, Nuala. So I hope you had a good overview of, let's say, the different stakeholders that can be involved in the data value chain, from the data to the actual decision-making process. And so now we would like to open to questions from the audience here and online. So I don't know if you have any online, but if someone has a question. So you have one. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Edouard.
Thanks, Pierre. Sorry to jump in. I was asked during one of the earlier breaks about sort of the financial model to sort of sustain these data services. I'm not sure if I gave a very clear answer. I see several pathways possibly, but I wanted to maybe ask Nuala, if she's still with us, to talk a bit more about the digital public works, because I think that could be a really interesting option in terms of including digital, you know, demand for maintenance of risk information as part of that public works space. And if Nuala is able to tell us a bit more about the project in Kenya and how she sees it potentially scaling up and what the co-benefits might be.
Yeah, Edward. Yeah, so a number of our colleagues were involved in a digital public works campaign in Kenya as part of the KISIP project. And in lieu of a traditional public work campaign where typically people would be hired to work on maybe solid waste management or maybe working on drainage or things like that, in this instance, young people were recruited from the local communities. They were trained on digital devices to do simple data collection around various different issues within the community, and then they were paid for the work that they did. And the team that were involved in this, they came up with quite a sophisticated scheme whereby, you know, they had a certain amount that they would work every day. If they wanted to work a little bit extra, there was a certain amount they could do for that. And then young folks who actually performed really, really well were identified for essentially promotion, and they would work on validation of data. So that project was a pilot phase. It worked really, really well. And now they're looking at expanding this to multiple communities as well. The co-benefits in this situation is you're getting this data collected for a much lower overall cost than you would do if you had to collect this using your traditional mechanisms. You're providing skills in technology, and also, there was a background in theory about why we collect the data that we collect for various different projects as well. So there's also an educational benefit for the young people that are participating in this. And obviously, there's the opportunity to make some money over the short term as part of the public work program.
Any question? So I think we are actually on time to wrap up. Maybe Edward, a word of closing remark.
Not for me necessarily, but I mean, I want to give our panelists, we do have a few more minutes, if they have any other thoughts they want to contribute. And Mercy, who has stayed up very late for us in Tanzania, it's like past 10:30 p.m. Mercy, is there any other closing thoughts you'd like to share with us?
Not much, but maybe just to complement what Nola said, the benefit, I'll speak from the students' side, the benefits that they get from doing these data collection exercises or tasks, they gain a lot of skills, and they actually, what they do, the experience they go through, they make them in a better positions to be employable. And I think the government or other projects need such people. It's much easier to have somebody who has gone through such a process than hiring somebody who is, has no such experience. So I think, yeah, the benefits can be both educational, but also the monetary part may not be very, how to say, they may not be very appropriate probably for students, but they gain much more actually from what other people gain. So I think that's what I can conclude with. Thanks.
Thank you, Mercy. If I may reflect on that answer, I think sort of the financial sustainability of this is not that it's going to be more expensive. If we get it right, it should be much cheaper. The challenge is that the pieces of the puzzle are across different resource buckets. So, ideally you have an educational objective of building the skills, a digital objective of creating a data service that is continuous, a sectoral objective of using that for the drainage master plan or the basin management plan. But if these skills are marketable, then you have a jobs and competitiveness outcome as well. And ideally, if you can train a lot of students to do something useful as they learn, but then they become marketable and they get jobs, that's a way to build an ecosystem, ideally for a lower cost than sort of what we're spending right now. So from my mind, the challenge is an organizational culture change, a sort of a business process model reform, where we can align these different activities on critical and recurring local challenges. So I don't think it's an absolute amount of resources, it's a synchronization and interoperability of them is how I see it.
Good. So on that, I think it's time to wrap up. I would like to thank our panelists here and online. So we are here, we'll be there tomorrow, and looking forward to following up. Thanks again.
Okay, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you for this very interesting session. Now it's time for a break. It's amazing how well we are doing in time. So please, let's, 15 minutes. I know for some of you, For those that arrived to the US yesterday or a few days ago, it's time for coffee. If you need to stretch your legs, I have two proposals for you. You can go walk down to the cafeteria. We have two things happening there. The Safer School, Fernando mentioned it earlier. If you want to see how a school shakes, this is your opportunity. And there is also a photographic presentation of the ADA Awards. If not, 4:30, please go back to the room. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm sorry to be the schoolmaster here, calling you all back from break. I know it was short. I know we are tired. We still have a couple more interesting conversations going on. So thank you for being back. I would like to move ahead with our agenda. Our next discussion is going to be led by Vladimir Tsirkunov. It will be about hydromet and early warning systems, which is one of our thematic areas. Vladimir, you're not going to be happy with me, but according to the script, I have to tell everyone that you are abandoning us and retiring in a few months. So this is going to be the last presentation you see from Vladimir, at least in his current capacity. Vladimir, please join me.
So awful. Very pleased to meet you. Sorry that you're still struggling to absorb all that huge amount of information which you heard, but I can tell you frankly, it is overwhelming even for somebody who sits in GFDRR for so long. There's so many new areas which are being developed, and I want to advise our management that we should have this internal event sometimes more kind of topical, because sharing this data, and you may go look again at this wealth of this presentational reports which are over there. It's all important, and it's all, I hope, will be utilized by multiple client countries and the developing countries where we work. But my narrow stream today will be to repeat what been already presented last year by Niels about hydromet services and early warning systems. I will try to concentrate on a few things, and again, starting with a challenge, the issue. The issue is still the same as the same when we started more than 10 years ago, meaning that in developing countries, the delivery of weather, climate, and hydrological services and early warning system is not what is required to protect people, to protect their vulnerable sectors, weather-dependent sectors, and unfortunately, this gap between developed and developing countries arguably is not shrinking. It's still the same. It's still wide enough. And as a result, you all know that consequences are dire. People are dying, and losses, excessive losses, which could have been avoided, they unfortunately there. What we do about that? As I mentioned, over 10 years ago, we started this program, now called thematic area, which is more correct word. And within this thematic area, our team was created. And the team traditionally has three pillars, and previous teams already repeated somewhat similar. It's about analytics. It's about using that analytics to build better projects for World Bank. And also partnerships is another very important area for this particular stream of work. The team, I can proudly report that small team was instrumental in quadrupling the amount of investments since we started. When I joined this group, it was less than 250 million. Now it's more than 1 billion for last 5 years, and that's the current amount. We also created community of practice, which includes some 50, 60 people, depending how you count. But regularly we used to bring these people together and usually twice a year, and present what is new within this space. Now, approach, that's an indicative illustration of how things change, because our analytical developments, which I will show next, is translated in what is most important for the World Bank and for our clients, which is significant investment. And if initially we were doing it sort of based on what our beneficiaries, national meteorological and hydrological agencies, wanted us to do, which is strengthen or modernizing their infrastructure, which is primarily observation infrastructure. So that was basic part of our approach. Now it's much more nuanced. We're looking at the whole value chain, including, of course, this, what was already mentioned a number of times, last mile and the communities being inclusive. You will also hear more about that later. So, and that complicates the whole process. It includes much more, many more beneficiaries within this. We are trying to look not just at the public sector, which before we did, but also the combination of public, private, and academic engagement. And previous presentation was quite illustrative on that, particularly on the academic side. This is a narrow technical area, and without having university which would be able to train some people who will be leading this area, thinking that this area will be flourishing is a bit too optimistic. We're also now attaching some of this hydrometeor warning system investments to the sectoral areas where this is particularly important, specifically agriculture, disaster reduction, of course, environment, and water resources management. This is highlights of some of analytical support, some of that you can find outside, of course, too many to read. Very few people will be able to read it. But anyway, during COVID, during these 3 years, we concentrated on that. And I wanted to thank our developing partners, donors, which made this happen for us. What we did differently in comparison to previous years, we concentrated on the whole value chain. If you can see one from the left side or right side from you, it goes from observation down to integrated service. So we would try to cover the whole value chain in terms of different analytical parts, how it works. Also, I wanted to attract your attention to the left top corner. It's our most recent flagship, which is about sustainable observation networks. And listening again, previous presenters, I think it's very good complementarity. They were reporting what are the most advanced approach with a top-down. In this case, this is a bottoms-up. This is about the top quality data which is required for global public good. It's about national level high quality data generation. What we did there, we introduced first time actually for this community. WMO doesn't have that pieces, and I probably should show you this table. And that shows total cost of ownership as well as benchmarks. First time this data is appeared, we will spend a lot of time, a lot of efforts talking to developed countries. And in this slide, you can see meteorological networks. So we also did hydrology, but I didn't include it. And it's 3 main observation networks which all developing partners are funding, which is automatic weather stations, which is radio zoned, which send launches up to 30 plus kilometers, which again, data is shared globally, and then it's a basis for numerical weather prediction. And of course, Doppler radar, which is a primary instrument for nowcasting and urgent, things like dangers from cyclone, etc. The red numbers showing the annual operation and maintenance without station or with labor, without labor. It shows quality control parameters, which are mostly missing for instance, for developing countries, which are in black. We managed to look only at the automatic weather stations, but in all other streams, developing countries didn't show any data. You see the numbers, and that these red numbers are significantly greater than we or any other investments ever thought. So now in designing our operations, we have to know these numbers, at least indicatively, to understand what will have a chance to be sustainable. And that's what we will recommend. We already started presenting these results. By the way, this study is very fresh. It's less than half a year since it was issued. And we presented it in a number of regions, and we will do it again in June, jointly with WMO in 2 events globally. Yeah, probably it's enough about this. And partnership. It's another very important area, and my line of argument here will be that importance of partnerships in this, again, narrow but very specialized technical area is growing for a number of reasons. First of all, I mentioned that evolution of our understanding what is included in this value chain, and this value chain includes many elements. Without having partners within national level, for instance, between Meteo agency, hydro agency, disaster reduction, local communities, and multiple other players, you cannot expect good results. On the international level, all of you in various degrees involved in that. There is also WMO. There is also multiple UN agencies which are investing. Overall, this area is getting crowded. There are many initiatives going on, and some of these programs are shown below. We're also listing some of our well-established partners, which we will discuss, I guess, in the next 5, 10, 15 minutes. And probably I should stop here. And in terms of time, I think we will be able to invite, okay, Christina, I will be working for you.
Thanks, Vladimir. So if you want to go ahead, you'll be moderating the panel. I would like to bring Cécine back again to the stage. She's the lead senior hydrometeorological hazard advisor and disaster risk reduction at USAID Bureau of Humanitarian Affairs. And I would like to also bring John Hardy, the head of the Climate Risk and Early Warning System Cruise Secretariat, which we talk a bit from them as well, from the WMO. So thank you, Vladimir. The floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Christina. Well, I guess we are having small panel, but nevertheless, we should introduce our panelists, even though most of people know you well enough. But let me start with, of course, Cécine. Cécine Tokar is currently the lead senior hydrometeorological hazard and disaster risk reduction advisor at the USAID and Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance. She provides technical advice to the agency on response to preparedness for and reducing risk of climate, weather, and water-induced disasters. She also oversees agency's programs on multi-hazard early warning systems, climate adaptation, and disaster risk reduction. Prior to joining USAID, Cécine has worked as hydrometeorological advisor at the U.S. National Weather Service, and she has PhD in hydrology and other relevant areas. If I may present John Harding. John is the head of the Climate Risk and Early Warning System Secretariat, CRUISE, which is known for many as CRUISE, at the World Meteorological Organizations. He has been working for 25 years developing and managing projects and programs in developing countries on resilience, climate change, and the risk of disasters. He has held positions at the United Nations in Geneva, New York, Haiti, Albania, Pakistan, and with the World Bank in Washington, D.C. So after that brief introduction, what we agreed with panelists, they will have few minutes briefly presenting what line of work they will do close to what I just presented. It will be each of them will do that. And after that, we will discuss how to strengthen partnership, what in their view we can do better, what, again, looking at this particular area of our business. Cécine, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon again. I know we are standing between you and the beautiful weather outside and your dinner, so I'm trying to be quick. I don't know if this is going to work. Maybe slides. Oh, here we are. That's great magic. What we do in USAID when we implement hydromet early warning systems, I'm showing you a picture. I think what we call it end-to-end early warning system. And as Vladimir said, the last mile actually is the first mile, because that's why we implement early warning systems, to save lives, reduce property losses, and losses on livelihood. So every component in this end-to-end system is important, as well as the linkages between the components. So you see observation, data collection, data control, processing, transmission, modeling, forecasting, dissemination, communication, and action. In all those little components, what we do, we look at the whole system, first assess where the needs and gaps are, and start from there to trying to ensure the whole system operate as a system. I can give a few examples. For example, in observation, we are working with National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration using 3D printers to print automated weather and water stations, because as Vladimir mentioned, sustainability of a hydromet network is extremely critical and extremely challenging in many parts of the world. With the 3D printed automated weather stations, the countries can actually produce their own weather stations, but the beauty of it, they can also maintain is compared to the other, the commercial counterpart is very, very affordable. In the modeling part, we work with a variety of entities, with WMO, GFDRR, cruise partnership, as well as, of course, National Meteorological and Hydrological Services, to develop forecasting models for them to monitor and issue warnings of flash floods, which are most deadly weather hazards because they can occur less than six hours of a time. What we are trying to do, let me see, we're trying to, oh, I'm sorry, let's go back this way. Okay, those are all some of our examples, but what lasts maybe decades or maybe 5 years, but we're trying to shift from what the weather will be, like 50 millimeters of rainfall, to what the weather is going to do, like closing of the roads or closing of, you know, the schools and whatnot. So we are shifting that towards the impact-based forecasting and predicting of impact, because the communication aspects are extremely important to take action. I'm showing an El Salvador example here. First, you identify hazards, then you identify impacts, and based on that, you identify risk, and trying to communicate this with both stakeholders as well as the public. In doing all those things, it's very important that we pay specific attention to vulnerable groups. Impact-based forecasting, that's especially important because certain incidences, we need to take different actions. Implementing what we call Weather Ready Nations program, we work with disaster management agencies. They identify, for example, opening shelters earlier when hurricane hits, because of women and disabilities needs more time to bring, you know, a woman being the, you know, the provider of care to elderly children and others need more time to evacuate, for example. So as we move forward with early warning for all, we need to make sure early warning for all is fully inclusive, bringing addressing the needs of women, people with disabilities, other marginalized groups. At the heart of all our programs is, capacity building. This is extremely important. As Vladimir mentioned, we have to look at building capacity at all levels. Capacity building or strengthening doesn't end with two weeks workshop on hydrometeorology. We do combination of online in-person trainings. We do very much phase trainings. In some programs, we do 6 steps, certification of hydromet forecasters to make sure they can use the system operationally. But what we also do promote SAT-SAT cooperation. We do build the regional hubs so they can train and support to the other countries within their own neighborhoods or region. So that's what we do, and that's partnership with GFDRR, CRUISE, WMO, and most importantly, of course, National Meteorological and Hydrological Services. I'm going to stop.
And it's time to listen what CRUISE can tell us about the partnerships and what they do in this space.
Thank you, Vladimir. Good afternoon. I mean, it's always a pleasure to be speaking at a GFDRR event. As you all have understood, I work in this financing mechanism, which is a relatively new mechanism, but when a group of countries came together and said they wanted to focus on in this area of work and build up a stronger commitment, it was actually GFDRR who was instrumental in setting this up and led a lot of those discussions, and in particular with regard to this financial intermediary fund that was set up at the World Bank as the trustee, and GFDRR is also our main operational partner. It means that GFDRR is leading the work in several countries, and what GFDRR has done very well is to align our portfolio of country projects with larger World Bank operations in countries, and and I think that's very much at the heart of our business model. I'm not going to use my slides. I'm just going to mention 3 points which are sort of at the front line of our current country operations, or what keeps us up at night really when we talk about financing early warning, and keeps us up in a good term. The first of all is this notion that has been referred to already by my colleagues of putting the exposed populations at the center of these systems that we set up in countries. And we used to refer to these communities as sort of end users, and often would engage them in sort of as an afterthought into our programming. But what we're seeing, we're really having to learn here to work with different types of institutions, and learn from the very start of the programming process when you start discussing the financing or program in a country context. And these can be humanitarian actors, it can be non-governmental organizations that represent
It's very difficult to flag you with a 1-minute card, knowing that this might be your last presentation. But in fact, we have some room afterwards where we can actually continue on the site. So thank you to John and to Ceci for flagging. Thank you for flagging the importance of partnerships, of knowing what others are doing and how we are working between us, because as they say, it takes a village. And with that, because it does take a village, we know that in order for disaster risk management to be sustainable, it actually needs to be inclusive. So I'm calling Zoe. I don't know if she needs an introduction, especially for those that were here the whole day. So Zoe is our lead disaster risk management specialist. She has many hats, she does many things. One of them is actually be the co-lead for the inclusive DRM work. With that, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks. I'm back, everyone. So we start with breakfast and it's dinner. I mean, we're going on inclusion, so thanks for sticking around. And unfortunately, my colleague Frida Rhoda is not feeling well, so it'll just be me, and we'll give it a go, and then we'll continue on. So happy to. Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to talk very briefly, and some of you heard a bit this morning from me on this, on our work on inclusive disaster risk management and gender equality, especially around some of the emerging topics that we've been getting quite a bit of demand for. Yeah, okay, got it. Okay, so you'd be surprised, and I know it's not you guys are not asking this question, but people do ask, and they say, why? They ask me, why is inclusion important, especially in DRM? And the answer, oops, I didn't get to the answer yet. The answer is because it is important. It's not being a good person. It's not because it's the right thing to do, even though it is, but it's because it's important to development outcomes. Because if some groups in society are left out of DRM programs, then it's detrimental to those people's lives, livelihoods, and assets. And it's not okay for half of the people in a community to be left out from that. So for example, we know gender gaps to access to information on things like disaster preparedness, public shelters can really be, can contribute to more gendered mortality outcomes, putting women at a disadvantage, but also we see the same for persons with disabilities, the elderly, and other marginalized groups. And so when we talk about inclusive disaster risk management, what we mean is we're working to promote resilience for everyone by improving terms for marginalized communities and social groups to participate actively in DRM efforts and empowering them, not seeing them as victims. They do have agency and they have a role to play. And so we, promote that across all of our work. And I think I also mentioned this morning, and Niels also said something, and Cezanne was also saying how bad it was before and how far it come from 5%. So on the up and up, doing well in terms of our gender-informed grants. It's increased over time. As of last fiscal year, we were around 92%. And this means that grants have specific gender analysis, actions, and/or indicators to monitor the outcomes. And so, of course, those data cover the entire GFDRR set of grant portfolio, but also now zooming in on the umbrella, which we're starting to monitor as of FY23 for the Partnership Council. So we've reached 90% and still a bit to go in the fiscal year, but we're maintaining momentum, which I think is important. So just to say, as you know, so this is a cross-cutting theme in our strategy. We've talked about it before. We've talked about it quite a bit, actually. But so what we've done over the past couple of years is really tried to take stock of our work on inclusion, identified some of the gaps, and laid out a framework for action. And this is, of course, a consultation process, not only with our partners, but also within the bank and talking to other, not only DRM teams, but also the gender team, social team, and others. And really what our framework focuses on knowledge and learning, technical assistance, and strengthening our partnerships, again, externally and internally. And so this is all reflected in the work plan. We got some comments on that earlier, but really the goal is to mainstream throughout. And we're also doing the same in our MEL, and that's how we monitor progress. So now I'm just going to cover 4 topics really quick on the emerging areas to give you some more details on that. And so first, one of the areas more on the sectoral side that we've been working on this fiscal year is working on adaptive social protection and disaster risk management linkages. So we developed a stocktake report on ASP and disaster risk management. We launched it in November 2022 at Understanding Risk with several government partners in coordination with the social protection team. And really what we're trying to do is outline synergies and highlight current practices, case studies to see where we can push the boundaries on adaptive social protection to prepare for disasters and make sure the most vulnerable are covered when they do strike and that they benefit from these programs. And so we've also scaled up technical assistance in this area. And we're really zooming in as well, again, on the inclusive side. So making sure that not only vulnerable households benefit, but also female-headed households, such as the case in Vanuatu. You'll hear tomorrow on the Pakistan recovery, quite a bit of emphasis also on social protection in that program that we're supporting as well. So I don't need to say much. We heard quite a bit in the previous panel on the need to scale up inclusive early warning systems. So of course, again, in the spirit of the UN's Early Warning for All initiative, we actually just released guidance on this, report on this, looking at good practices and entry points, and it was prepared with the University College London and with our GFDRR Hydromet team. And where we are focused is the people-centered part, right? So that's where our work is looking at making sure all groups of people benefit and they receive and can interpret and act on the warnings, and that communities are fully engaged. And we're going to hear about disaster fighters. Joaquin is here. We're going to hear about that next. And so Haiti is a great example where the government used song and dance to engage on early warning and really making sure people were prepared and understood the messages. And we're going to also have an online training that is going to be launched later in June, which will be available to everyone on this topic. And we're applying this type of work in places like Yemen, an FCV location, on actually how to include better inclusion in the early warning systems. Okay. Third, also MBS. So we heard quite a bit from the MBS program earlier. We've worked with them as well to prepare a guidance note on integrating social inclusion and gender in nature-based solutions programs. And again, it's focusing more on the entry points and actions, very practical types of guidance to teams, government counterparts, and looking at things like employment opportunities. We heard about that earlier as well from the NBS team. Capacity building, what project design features can you tweak to increase inclusion across a range of typologies? So things like targeting communities for skills training, and sometimes it's interesting, in some places, women were targeted and they didn't want those jobs. So then you have to come up with other options that are more suitable to them based on their preference. It really is about the local context and the need. Promoting safety, universal accessibility in public spaces. All of these things make a big difference in how people can access and use and benefit from MBS. And so the various examples from our portfolio. And just to note, we do have an event coming up on June 6th where we're going to disseminate this work with the MBS team. The ILO Austria is going to join us for that. So we will send you information so you can join. And last but not least, we also have been working quite a bit with our gender group and other partners on updating guidance on preventing violence against women and girls in DRM programs. And so this, as you know, gender-based violence often increases after a disaster occurs, but there are several proven ways to anticipate, prepare for, and prevent this. And so that's what we've looked at across the range of sort of spectrum of DRM programs, not only post-disaster, but also pre-disaster. And so this is an update from work that was done in 2015, focusing more on risk reduction, and will be launched by end of June. So we'll keep you posted on that one too. And then just finally, we've also been working with a range of task teams and government counterparts to provide technical assistance, looking, for example, at things like gender inclusion and as part of disaster risk management policy frameworks in our CAT DDOs in Latin America, also in disability and DRM roadmaps in different Pacific islands. So really there is quite a bit of demand out there, but luckily we've built quite a good network to also be able to provide that support. And finally, looking forward, so basically what we have been doing under the new strategy, I guess it's not that new anymore, but what we've been working on is trying to identify the gaps. And for example, we noted in the past that emergency projects were lagging on gender. So we've been working on all these operational knowledge and learning products. Then this past year, we went deeper on different sectors where there was demand to do more on inclusion. And going forward, it's really taking some of these approaches to scale through train the trainers, more scaled up TA, and getting sort of even more into the operational side of things. So I will stop there. So thank you.
Thank you. So in case you haven't realized, we want everyone in GFDRR to be an inclusion ambassador. So if you still have some questions, you can go afterwards. I'd like to introduce you to Joaquin Toro. He's a lead disaster risk management at the bank, and he's here to talk to us about something that everybody is always very excited about, which is Understanding Risk 2024. So Joaquin.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Hi, everybody. I hope to show you a little bit of what is understanding risk. Understanding risk is initiative that we started in 2010, and what it is. This is I was waiting for you. Yes. I guess this. Yes. So what is understanding risk? I think understanding risk is where the magic happens. In fact, I will just drop this here because we're going to do some magic at the end to demonstrate how different and creative activities can help us to communicate better what we do at GFDRR, at the bank, at the world. Understanding risk is a collaboration platform. It's a knowledge sharing platform. And it's an innovation. And the innovation is not just on technology, it's the way we communicate. We believe that understanding risk is a community of communities because we have people from every background. we have engineers, we have firefighters, we have risk financing people, we have risk identification people, but everything is united in one place where we have fun. We even had artists, we had magicians, that you will think what a magician has to do with risk, and we will learn that today. Understanding risk started in Washington, and let's see a little bit of a video if this helps.
Hello, selamat datang, and welcome to the Understanding Risk community. Hi everyone, welcome to a fantastic morning to all media research still in process. It's been my honor and deep privilege to be part of this conversation. Stay inspired, be safe.
So understanding risk started after the earthquake in 2010. We figured out that there were a lot of initiatives, GFDRR, that were bringing communities together. However, a little bit more on the political side, a little bit more on the recovery side. But I think what makes unique understanding risk is that we're bringing all these kinds of backgrounds. We are community of communities, as we said, because not only in the forum, in the global forum, there is this exchange of ideas between the scientists, universities, with the communities, with the practitioners, with the private sector. So it's melting these communities and making sure, for example, that the innovation is feasible and showing that it is feasible. I think it's a great place for testing pilots and exploring new ideas. The first time we started talking about artificial intelligence was in Mexico with a keynote. And the first time we started talking about drones was after the earthquake in Haiti in 2010. And then it was moved forward in Africa. So it's a laboratory of things that are expanding. But we didn't have only the global forums. We had, we had other 21 other regional activities that were taking place in the regions, in the countries. where these activities, the same spirit, the same fun, and the same spirit of bringing together communities in each of the countries, regions. We had the first one in Brazil in 2011. Then we had several others. We had 21 of them. I'm very bad with this clicker. We also had activities that were born from these communities. No, we had one activity, for example, the You Are Women, where we had all this forum just focused on the achievements and the highlighting the women on disaster risk management. We have today we're going to hear a little bit more on the Averted Disaster Award, which was born from one of these meetings, the forum, the disaster fighters, which are going to talk tomorrow a little bit more, the code for resilience, etc. So what I mean with this is that there are concrete partnerships that are created in these forums. We had a rain of a lot of good things. We had the 7 global forums. The last one was in Florianopolis. We had these 21 spin events that we call spin events because they are organized in the different regions, in the different countries. In total, we have 646 sessions, almost 2,000 speakers, partners that have come together to help build the community, over 15,000 participants. And overall, we have over 20,000 members. These are practitioners. These are engineers. These are from the private sector, from the public sector. And very much we have the participation of almost all the countries. And we do this because the impact of this is shown. It is a unique place. You won't see people wearing ties, or you will see people sitting beside the minister giving high fives. You know, it's a place where everybody is the same because we are trying to get to the same place in a sense that we all want the risk reduction. We all want this good for the world. This 15 initiatives supported by understanding risk or created an understanding risk, and we will see one today, tomorrow another one. Again, we were discussing topics ahead of the time, as I was mentioning, the drones, the satellite imagery, the artificial intelligence, way ahead of our times. I think in the last Understanding Risk, we had a survey, and we asked how many partnerships, new partnerships you created during this forum. And a lot of people, 50%, created 1 to 3 new partnerships that really they are trying to implement things in the countries or new initiatives. Other 32 said 3 to 7, and most likely 97% are coming back to the new Understanding Risk, which it is an achievement because, as I said, it is fun, and we are trying to really make a space for people to participate, to create, and to think outside of the box. So where is Understanding Risk 24 going to be? I don't know. We need a magician for that. So let's see if the magic helps. So I will help you a trick. This is something that we learned during one of these events in Understanding Risk. And at the beginning, it was like how a magic trick can help us and how this relates to disaster risk management, to disasters, to preparedness. And I think it's about uncertainty. So I'll teach you the trick because you can teach this to your family, to your friends. Who doesn't know me? Raise your hand. Everybody knows me? Well, that you see, magic happens. Okay, here. Okay, I'll play with you. Maybe you can hear me. I have 3 cards in this envelope: Japan, France, and US. So I want you to think, where is going to be understanding risk? Think about it. And I know where, what are you thinking? I already know. So you can tell everybody. And yes, where is Japan, is France, or is United States? I already know. I mean, they don't know, but I know. You can say France. You think it's France? Really? Are you thinking it is France? It is, but I knew that you were thinking it is France. Because, it is France. You were thinking of France. But what if you said Japan? As a disaster management specialist, I'm prepared. And you should prepare, no? So these are the uncertainties that we are prepared for, because if you said Japan, I said, you were thinking about Japan. But what if you said US? I don't have nothing here. I don't have anything in my envelopes. But I'm prepared. Because I know you were thinking United States. And this easy trick and fun is a little bit what we are trying to promote on understanding risk. No? We are prepared. And actually, during the last understanding risk in Florianopolis, we had to move the whole venue from one day to another because it rained so much that we were prepared for an event outside in a fortress. And I don't know if you saw a little bit of what was happening in the video. And we had to move everything from that day to the next day to a different location. And with an amazing team, we made it happen because we were prepared. And this is a silly example, but I think it is how we communicate to each other, you know, with fun, but with content, with the innovation, the edge of the technology. And hopefully we are going to wait for you on Understanding Risk 2024. We don't know where it's going to be, but if anybody knows, let me know. I'm ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Joaquin, for bringing the magic. I think that we are ready to come towards the end of our day. I'm actually going to ask Stefan to again join us. We are going to, he is going to present to us the Averted Disaster Award called ADA that attempts to recognize the success on averting a disaster.
Thank you very much. So yes, thanks for still being with us at the end of the day. The point I want to make here is who in this room is working primarily on disaster risk prediction? Okay, so to make that choice, you have to be a little bit crazy, right? It's a type of job where the best you can hope is benign neglect. And if you're doing your job really, really well, and there is no crisis, no disaster, nobody cares about you. Nobody celebrates success. This, to me, was absolutely striking the day we launched the World Development Reports on Risk and Opportunity at the World Bank. That day, it was October 13, 2013. The Odisha was affected by this major typhoon that hit at the same place where a typhoon killed 10,000 people 10 years later. And this time, Odisha evacuated 1 million people. And in the end, 46 people died, which by all metrics is too many, but a major success compared with 10 years before. And so the day we were launching our reports, I looked at the India newspapers and they interviewed a lot of people, and people were saying, I can't believe they made 1 million people move for something so small. It just killed only like 46 people. The poor people who just managed to put in place all of this system and managed to evacuate 1 million people and probably saved a few thousand people all they got in the newspaper the next day was criticism because of the cost of the evacuation and how complicated it was and so on. And so I think this idea that this is a topic where success is invisible, and because it's invisible, it doesn't create the right incentive, especially for policymakers very sensitive to the political economy, to act. I think it's something that we have all seen and felt. So this prize, the Averted Disaster Award, is trying to help make success more visible in disaster risk management. And so it was created, Joachim mentioned it from UR. It is supported by GFDRR. And really the goal is to change the narrative from looking only at failures to also looking at the successes in disaster management. To do it by basically showing what could have happened without good choices. So when something happens and there is no big disaster like in Odisha in 2013, trying to understand what would have happened if some very critical decisions have not been made, find the people who made those decisions, and to celebrate their success and their work. Just to make that more visible, to have like maybe a more positive story about risk management. I don't know what your experience is of policy dialogue, but nobody's really happy to see the risk management guy entering the office, right? It's just like, you cannot build here, you cannot do that. Can you imagine? So having something more like about success and creating an incentive for policymakers to make the hard choices, because then they can be rewarded for it. And of course, and I don't know if there is a clicker somewhere or if Joachim stole it to, look in your pocket. It's here. So this is the, oh, sorry. Yeah, I accused you, I'm very sorry. So this was something that was flagged in particular in this academic paper, and really the Averted Disaster Award is to try to operationalize this idea of making success more visible. It's Joachim's fault again, it's not working. No. I think end of the day, no more batteries. I hope you have more energy than the clicker. So maybe can somebody swap one slide? So we created this award, and so the goal would be, of course, to have that in the in our community to celebrate our people, but also outside of it, and so giving it a lot of visibility. So we have a selection committee where I'm very proud of being part of, but we have also Shanna McLean, we have Dr. Olivia Jensen, and David Lallemand. And so every year we're trying to select out of the nomination that we receive what is the best avoided disaster. And what we're asking people to apply for is to explain to us how the decisions that they or somebody else made has made a difference. So we ask them to do a counterfactual analysis, which is not the easiest thing to do, right? To have like an analysis showing what would have happened if some decisions have not been made. So there is one dimension of visibility, and I think there is also one dimension of trying to make people think a little bit more in terms of alternative scenarios, so that they can see the success. So in the first year, this is a new thing, so always a challenge with visibility, right? We already got a lot of applications. You see the map of those applications here, covering all continents, all hazards, very many different dimensions, and very, very strong. I was very surprised to find the people trying to explain what could have happened without their decision. So we had everything, right? From early warning systems, as we discussed a few minutes ago, to agroforestry programs. We had NGOs and very small scale interventions, and we had big government programs. So a very, very difficult task to select the winner out of this field. In the end, the winner was from Bangladesh, and it was the Bangladesh Red Crescent Society for a program of forecast-based financing. And their counterfactual analysis was for a series of natural disasters that affected Bangladesh in 2020. So in May and June, it was Super Cyclone Amphan, but then it was followed by more rain that created additional floods. And this program, because it was forecast based, provided support to people before the disasters to help them prepare. And the application made a very convincing case that by providing resources to people before the shock, they made it possible to people to prepare in ways that would have been impossible without this support. So this is just one example. We'll have this averted disaster awards every year. We hope we can broaden the number of applications covering different sectors, different regions. But of course, we also need to give this visibility, right? The only point of this is to give visibility. And so you will hear from us trying to push this award. What I want to propose now is to give this visibility. We created with our partner Water Bear a 15 minutes documentary on this Bangladesh Red Crescent initiative of forecast-based financing. So we'll show you that, and that will be the end of your day before we move to the drinks. I want to say that we will have a 2023 Averted Disaster Awards. We have picked the winner, but I won't tell you a thing. This will be announced later, just to keep the suspense and to focus today on the 2022 winners. Thank you very much.
আসসালামু আলাইকুম। বাংলাদেশ আবহাওয়া অধিদপ্তর ঢাকা 19 অক্টোবর বুধবার দক্ষিণ অথবা দক্ষিণ পূর্ব দিক থেকে ঘন্টায় 45 থেকে 60 কিলোমিটার বেগে বৃষ্টি অথবা বজ্রবিদ্যুৎ সহ অস্থায়ীভাবে দমকা অথবা ঝোড়ো হাওয়া বইতে থাকবে। যেগুলোকে নদীবন্দর সমূহকে 1 নম্বর পুনরায় 1 নম্বর সতর্ক সংকেত দেখিয়ে দিতে বলা হয়।
Bangladesh, a land of rivers, of water. More than 50 international rivers flow through this country, before they drain out into the Bay of Bengal. Millions of people here live among the space between water and depend on it for their survival.
Bidian, Salmare যাইছ
জামো
মাছ মারি এসি
চলো
মাছ আছে নদী তার
যে দুই চারটে আছে
স্যারের কথাটা কি মনে আছে
মনে তো নাই
কিছু মনে নাই বাড়ি যেটি ভাঙিয়ে আনলাম ঘর তুলছি ঘর তুলিয়ে ঘর সারি টারি স্কুল গেছি সেটাও মনে নাই
মনে থাকে ছোট ছিল অতটা মনে থাকে
আমার জীবনে আমরা 14 বার করে করছি আবার এইখানে যখন বাড়ি আছে এখান থেকে 14 বার করে গেছে হয়ে গেছে আমার 14 বার ভাঙন দিছে আমার বাড়ি তো ওই দিকে ওই কালকে যে জায়গায় গেছি ওই জায়গায় আসলাম আগে ভাঙতে এখানে আসছি নদী আমার জন্য তো বেশি ভালো নয় নদী খারাপ জিনিস ভাঙতে আমাকে নিয়ে গরিব করে ফেলাইছে নদী
Bangladesh is one of the 10 most disaster-prone countries in the world.
ঘন্টায় 95 কিলোমিটার বেগে রাতে দেশের দক্ষিণ উপকূলে আঘাত হানতে যাচ্ছে সাইক্লোন চিত্রা
This is the country that owes its life from water. Floods swept over the land again this summer, dealing yet another blow for a community still reeling.
আমি তো কাজ করি কৃষিকাজ তো আর সবসময় থাকে না মাছের সময় আসলে মাছ ধরবো আর যখন মাছ না থাকবো তখন ওই কৃষিকাজে যাবো 12 বছর বয়স হয়েছে তখন থেকে বাড়ি ভাঙা দিছি আর ওই ছোট বাচ্চা নিয়ে আবার মনে করেন ওই চর থেকে আর চরে গেছি নদী তো এটা বোঝে না যে ভাই এখন ছোট বাচ্চা আছে এটা তো ভাঙা যাবে না এটা হলো সব আল্লাহর ইচ্ছে
To counter the effects of cyclones and floods in the country, the Bangladesh Red Crescent Society is implementing forecast-based financing and early action to positively impact the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. BDRCS volunteers go into communities and collect data to make a list of the most vulnerable households.
ভাই কেমন আছেন
আসি আল্লাহ রাখছে
আমরা দুইজন আসছি হলো বাংলাদেশ রেড ক্রিসেন্ট সোসাইটি থেকে আপনাদের এই এলাকায় তো বন্যা হয়েছে তাই না
হ্যাঁ ভাই
তো এই বন্যার সময় আপনার বাসায় পানি কেমন উঠছিল
পানি মনে করেন 2 ফিটের মতো আমার
2 ফিট
ঘরে উঠছে
Weather and climate forecasts are combined with risk analysis to predict when and where a hazard will strike. Once storm intensity reaches trigger levels, unconditional cash support is immediately released to families to take life-saving actions before disaster occurs.
প্রিয় এলাকাবাসী লক্ষ্য করে শুনুন সমুদ্রে একটি ঘূর্ণিঝড় সৃষ্টি হয়েছে ঘূর্ণিঝড়টি ক্রমাগত এলাকার দিকে অগ্রসর হচ্ছে তাই 5 নং বিপদ সংকেত চলিতেছে আপনাদেরকে সকলকে সতর্ক থাকার জন্য অনুরোধ করা যাচ্ছে সতর্ক থাকবেন
নিয়মিত আবহাওয়া বার্তা শুনবে এলাকাবাসী লক্ষ্য করে চলুন সমুদ্রে একটি ভূমিকা সৃষ্টি হয়েছে ভূমিকাকে ক্রমাগত এলাকাটিকে
ওই 3 নম্বর সিগন্যাল দিলে আর আমি ঘরে থাকি না, সব গুছিয়ে গেছি নিজে। আশ্বিন কার্তিক 2 মাস, এই তেল ভয় বেশি, কেমন সিডার এই পড়তে পারে, আবার ওই সব গুছিয়ে গেছিলে আবার ওই সাইকেল নিয়ে যেতে হয়। মাথা আশ্রয় স্কুলে যাবা, ঠিক আছে? স্কুলে সুন্দরভাবে স্কুলে স্কুলে কি পড়া দেবে তোমাকে?
বাংলা, ইংরেজি, ব্যাকরণ, না তুমি কোনদিন জব দেখেছো?
হ্যাঁ, আমি সিটার দেখছি, আই লাভ ইউ দেখছি, সিটারে যা ভয়ঙ্কর হয়েছে হ্যাঁ বলার মতন। তুমি জ্বর দেখলে কি করবা?
তুমি জ্বর দেখলে সাইকেল নিয়ে যাবো।
কিরম যাবা?
আমার নিজের জামা কাপড় গুছিয়ে কোনো শুকনো খাবার থাকলে সেটা গুছিয়ে তারপর সাইকেল নিয়ে যাবো।
আমার তো এটা স্থান, আমি তো এখান ছেড়ে কোনো যেতে পারবো না। আমার তো আর কোনো যাওয়ার কোনো তৌফিক নেই যে আমি এই জায়গাটা আমি একটু দূরে যাই, দূরে গেলে আমি বন্যে কোনো ভয় পাবো না। আমার এখানে বসবাস করতে হবে, এখানে থাকতে হবে, ধরো দুধ খাইতে হবে, সাইকেল নিয়ে যাইতে হবে, আইতে হবে, এছাড়া তো আমার কোনো উপায় নেই।
Unconditional cash grants can be used for anything the recipient family needs and help them prepare for the economic aftermath of the disaster. The money is often used to replace assets and to rebuild livelihoods lost.
এই আমার কাছে টাকা 4,500 দিছি না, 2500 টাকা আমি খরচ করে খাসি, একটা ছাগল কিনছি 2,000 দিয়ে। ছাগলটা ভালোই আমার বাচ্চা দিয়েছে, বাচ্চা আমি বেচাইছি 5টা, সব শুদ্ধ এখনো 6টা আছে। এখন একটা ঠেকা করলে আমি একটা ছাগল বাজারে নিয়ে যাবে বিক্রি করি, হয়তো খরচ করি তার মতন জায়গা।
যেখানে আসছিলাম ওখানে একটা নদী ভাঙে যাওয়ার পরে এখন আবার দেখছি যে পঞ্চর ভাঙবো না, এটা একটা মনের কল্পনা যে এটা কতদিন থাকতে পারে, আবার আসি এটা আর কি বাড়ি করছি।
আমার মেয়ে যাতে আমি চাই যে একটা বড় লেখাপড়া করে বড় একটা চাকরিজীবী, একটা ডাক্তার, আমিও তো একটু উপকার হয়।
দেখছো কি সুন্দর একটা সূর্য উঠেছে, আমরা যদি 5 দিনে উঠতে পারতাম তো ভালোই হয়েছে, আমরা সারা জায়গায় উঠে থাকতাম। কালকে স্কুল যাবি? তুই যাবি? হ্যাঁ। তুই বড় হয়ে কি হতে চাস? আমি বড় হয়ে ডাক্তার হতে চাই। তুই কি হতে চাস? আমি। কেন? মানুষের সেবা করার জন্য। তুই? আমি মানুষের সেবা করার জন্য। গরিবদের আমি চিকিৎসা করবো বিনা টাকায়। তুই? আমি আল্লাহর রহমতে যদি আল্লাহ ডাক্তার বানায় তাহলে।
কত জানার ভাগিয়ারি বাড়ি আরে বাড়ি বগে কি তোর ঘর মেরে নিয়েছি কত জানার ভাঙিলুরি বসত বাড়ি
Thank you, Stefan. You are right. Actually, this is a very nice way to put an end to the day. And we will keep the intrigue. Of course, the winner of 2023. We'll see, we find out soon. Before we close the day and before I give the word to Renaud for his closing remarks, I would like to thank you all for staying with us today for some a very long day. And I will hope that you join us also tomorrow. For those joining in person, we will be in the same room, MC2 800. It's difficult to find, but I think we've gone up and down several times, so we probably all know how to come there, how to arrive there. For those online, the WebEx link is different. So please look at the invitation. You have the link for tomorrow there. And without further ado, Renaud, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thanks to all of you for a very engaging day and for your active participation. I think we've shared a lot of information with our partners over the course of the day, and it's probably a little bit of information overload at this point. But we do hope that you found these stories of impact on the ground both informative and inspiring. Certainly, from our perspective, it's been only a glimpse of some of the dimensions of what GFDRR does. I think Axel, our senior managing director, put it quite nicely when he said that, you know, this is a bit of the GFDRR is a stellar group. I mean, it's a bit of a jewel in the crown in terms of the quality of the partnership and its reputation in our space, but I think we can do much more. You know, I think there is much more demand for its work. It's never been more relevant, and we can certainly try to continue to go to scale on this work. And I think that there are many interesting technical dimensions, from nature-based solutions to inclusion, gender, disability, fragility, you know, any number of sectoral interventions from health to education to transport, where there are really exciting things happening, and we want to make sure that we build on those. So if you have any follow-up questions, of course, don't hesitate to reach out to us, to approach anybody. We, of course, want to hear from all of you. Tomorrow, we'll explore more facets of the work of GFDRR. We'll look at some of the recent disasters around the world, including the Turkey earthquake and the Syria earthquakes and the Pakistan floods, which have been two of the most, of course, striking and unfortunate examples of why this work is so very important. So we do hope you can join us for a continuation. In the meantime, I think it's enough for one day, so we can close off actually with a few minutes to spare. There are cocktails in the private dining room ABC downstairs, as I think you were just explaining. But I really want to thank my co-chairs from the US and all of the partners for an excellent day. Apologies that I couldn't be with you throughout the day, but you'll be seeing me on and off again tomorrow. So all the best and have a great evening. Thank you.
Just for those that don't remember what is the private room ABC, is where we had lunch and some of us also breakfast.